Oh, hello. My name is Michael Kajowski. Uh, I want to thank you for watching this channel. I hope I don't have to clear my throat many hundreds of times. Right at the moment, it's 6:57 a.m., 6:57 in the morning on Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. And I would like to thank the people who have watched my videos. About a month ago, I started something on YouTube called a channel, and I was not familiar. I was probably just sitting around in my idle moments and fiddling with stuff on my computer or on my phone. And often wondered, was curious, how do you upload videos and movies to the internet? I didn't know how. And this usually happens to me. I was just sitting there fiddling with the controls, and I realized that the authorities, if you want to call them people, or the internet, if you want to call it a thing like an object, was allowing me to upload stuff to it. So I happened to be on YouTube. I hit the upload button, and some videos inside my laptop were, for the first time that I can remember, uploaded to through YouTube, were uploaded, well, what they call YouTube Studio, to the internet. Well, now it's approximately a 1 month later, and a lot of the views on there are, of course, myself double, checking this stuff. How does it work? But I would say that it's now clearly up in the hundreds and thousands. So I realize people have told me occasionally they think I'm a naive person. I realize that lawyers and other people, some of whom might be enemies of mine, might be among the ones that watch this stuff in order to size me up and hit me and copy stuff and so on. But I still want to thank people for giving this serious attention. I'm up in the thousands after 1 month. So if I do achieve any popularity, I would certainly be looking for a sponsor or sponsors, and I would certainly be requesting to be paid, at least a freelance stipend or commission or salary or something by the internet or by YouTube or by a sponsor or by whoever, a TV station or whoever I can get to sponsor me. Once again, I'd like to apologize. This clearing the throat stuff. Uh, I know it's not professional. All right, so we're already 3 minutes into this tape, and once again, I've had my sleep interrupted by other people in the world. And I would like to say the last time I videoed one of these was about a week ago, and it got 60 views, whoever they are. I'm suggesting the best viewers of this might be anybody. There's all different people in the world. But especially, just singling people out, I would think lawyers, writers, employees of the FBI, police, law enforcement, private security, people who are trying to learn foreign languages, residents of China, Mexico, Texas, Wisconsin, Illinois, California, and many other places. I would think there'd be a lot of people who would be interested in this. So, as I mentioned in the last one, along this line of thinking is along the lines of a lawyer or the FBI or the police or something like that. I see the sun is coming up out there, and it's now just gone to 7:01 in the morning. um, I guess as I'm getting older here, apparently it's going to take me about an hour to clear my throat out. Well, first of all, let me try to pick interesting things because I have worked at newspapers and I have done classrooms in foreign countries. Uh, I'm going to try not to give away my secrets, but I'm going to try to tell you something that's worthwhile so that you have a logical reason why you're, watching this. Uh, this is mostly about invasion of privacy, electronic harassment, electronic surveillance, and so on. Let me just, this will make more sense when I put a version on the internet that is written down. This version here, I'm working this out on my videotape. I'm finding as I get older that, like a lot of people, my eyesight is deteriorating a little, and I'm having more difficulty driving, reading, writing, with various simple activities. First of all, I'd like to, address this thing with my enemies. I guess I'll answer some of their questions. I don't think the enemy's concerns are sincere. Um, I view myself as general employment. I do not think of myself real perfectly or clearly as a writer or police officer or actor or something like that. I understand if you do get gigs and you do get those roles, you can, go along with that. But I started working way back in the 1970s, and people that met me, uh, they encouraged me to do what I'm doing right here, right now. They asked me to try to work things out through conversation. They suggested to me that to attempt to work in Old English literature, writer is very competitive and very difficult. So I had no recommendations in adulthood, at car dealerships, newspapers, the military, or any place. I had little support or no support that I think you're clearly a writer, or I think you're clearly an actor or a script writer or a book writer or a newspaper writer or blah blah blah. But I think general employment gets the most support in adulthood, high school, and in college. And I did receive warnings and guidance all along, elementary school, high school, and on into adulthood. When you try to work things out through conversation, like I'm doing right here, we think you're on the right track more. If you, try to write it down on paper, there's an awful lot of competition in that. And as we know, every day, just looking out the window over there, the world gets older and older. Small steps each day. And, a lot of those old, musty, old, yellowed, volumes and collections and novels and books and stuff at public libraries and at any place, they age a little each day. And the world, as we can see, is completely choked full of that stuff. Like this video here, there's millions or billions of these things. And you go to a public library, books, the librarians confused which ones to keep or which ones to throw out. I would suggest to them to all, to just let the public decide things that are checked out a lot, whether it's the computer station, the something on video, a book, or whatever. If the people are using it a lot, obviously they have to go with it. You go to any public library, seems to be mostly the computer stations, unless I'm seeing things. All right, so let me get back to this though, in case somebody from a law office or the FBI or the police is watching this. I'm always reporting somewhat concerns about invasion of privacy, unlawful surveillance, electronic harassment, blacklisting, blackballing, conspiracy, unfairness in the employment system, unfairness in the government system, unfairness in the society. So let me give you an example, because I get told occasionally that I'm a naive person and I don't realize my enemies are watching this and they're going to pick it apart. I have tips and secrets and they flashes of brilliance and they sometimes they're in the middle of things or they're wherever they end up going. But let me give you an example of something that I think worked. 1989, the summer, I've been more or less unemployed for 6 months consecutive. At that time, my longest period of unemployment. I went to the unemployment compensation office. I had been harassed off it by, my enemies, and now they were giving me permission. By the way, how do they harass you? What do you mean by that? I mean, you can't breathe air. You think you're dying. You're in a state of panic. You can't sleep at night. You only get 15 to 45 minutes of interrupted rest every night for 1.5 years. That's what I'm calling harassment sometimes. Electronic, through surveillance equipment, through satellites, through the misuse of sophisticated technology. Am I accusing? I'm just questioning and exploring it. You have to understand my background. At the time that I first became consciously aware of this, I was mostly a newspaper wire editor, newspaper sports editor, and retail salesperson, mostly in luggage, clothing, automotive. And I like my work, I like my job. So I'll start off with that. I was at the Unemployment Compensation Office, a branch in Milwaukee back in the summer of 1989, and I was at my wit's end. I was really panicking. I mean, I was starting to commit little acts of vandalism and stuff. I just had never been unemployed like that for so long. So the woman there did what I thought is an excellent job. And this is an example for you. Even if there's only one person out there watching this, or 1 million, or whatever it is, um, she insisted I tell her every job, every employer that I've ever had. So I did. She wrote down all the names, all the addresses, and she wrote the word blacklist under every single entry. Now this is what we're talking about. When there's an election nowadays and you have a rich billionaire who seems to be experimenting and whatever, named Donald Trump, running for president, and you have an older experienced veteran, Joseph Biden, uh, as president. And these people both have white hair, gray hair, bald spots and stuff, and they don't generate much interest. I think it's the problem that I'm talking about here in this thing. At times, invasion of privacy has been the number one issue in the United States. Unless I'm seeing things, they used to take polls back in the 1980s, and this sophisticated technology, these cameras, surveillance equipment, all the divorce cases in the United States, all the new business startups where a small business is trying to get going, and there's a real large monolith spying on them and copying all their good ideas and using, intellectual property or whatever you want to call it. The first examples that came up with me were when I researched it in 1988 at the UW Milwaukee Library. Back in the 1970s, a guy would try to start a new bank in the United States, private capitalism, democracy, and he would find these real large banks and real large credit card companies and stuff. They know all about him. They know his accounting, they know his bookkeeping, they know all about him, his family, everything else. You walk up to strangers, they know all about you. Uh, you know, that was a big issue back in the 1970s and 80s. When I was a college student, you'd look at the newspapers on the college campus, half a dozen of them, communist newspapers, labor union newspapers, and it would be the CIA is spying on you. The CIA has illegally coerced this or that intellectual researcher or this or that college professor or whatever. The college professor is spying on you. He's on the payroll of the KGB, of the CIA. And these higher ups, these authorities, they're interfering with your private life. They're interfering, with your private health. So let me get back to 1989. This woman was writing up all the jobs I'd had so I could collect unemployment compensation. And she wrote the word blacklist on every single entry and she signed her name on it. So she was supporting me. She was saying any of these companies could have gone ahead and kept me permanently as a permanent employee at their company. So I did collect unemployment compensation, and to me, that's an example of good government. I understand that's controversial with some types of people. Some types of people think you should never collect unemployment compensation. You should not have to write the word blacklist down on a government form or a sheet of paper. Well, I'm not one of those people, and I've been voting for candidates in both the major political parties. I guess I looked at it the other day. I'm not even. I think I voted for more Democrats than Republicans. Uh, but I'm generally what you consider a nonpartisan independent voter who's voted for both. I think this dissatisfaction is those people are gunners, egomaniacs, people like Trump and Biden. They're ball hogs. They're up there. They just want to get on television all the time, and they had to give people all sorts of horrible, long, monotonous lectures. Whatever they're talking about on there, it just goes on forever, and most people are familiar with it. Especially now as our population is aging, and someone like me, there's little they can tell me on there that I haven't already thought of. We did have the warnings in childhood. That's an idiot box, a boob tube. You don't have to watch that. You're better off reading it. And like I'm saying, they told me all along. I think this conversational approach for you, oral English, is one of the most correct ones. If you try to work this stuff out on paper, that old language stuff, old English, the old what do you call it, Greek mythology, the old Roman society, old English in Great Britain and Ireland, Canada, United States. There's just an awful lot of folks who think they should write their thoughts down on paper, and they ask me, lots of places. Uh, you're probably better off trying to, your father was a salesman, your grandfather was a salesman. Most of your male relatives are small businessmen and salesmen, so you're probably better off just trying to talk through things with this conversational English approach. So there's an example. So after this woman authorized me for unemployment compensation, and I want to thank the government. I'm trying to motivate them by saying something positive to them rather than there's constantly Trump on the TV set. He's on there every day saying how lousy he thinks the United States is and how lousy he thinks the U.S. government is. And anyone who disagrees with him on any subject is his enemy, and blah blah blah. So, I mean, I'm sure most adults have seen that, and it is entertaining. It gets people to watch it a little, but uh, unfortunately, those all those hungos, egomaniacs, and ball hogs that they have in the Republicans and Democrats nowadays at the national level. Unfortunately, they actually follow that as an example. They think that's good. I just don't know where those people are coming from. I'm talking about this woman that got the unemployment compensation across to me, and she wrote down the word blacklist every single entry for every. She's telling me, and she signed all of them her name to show that's her doing that. Any of those employers could have hired me permanently. I get lost in the details. So when I get to the stage where I write this down and do a script on here, it will be an improvement over this. But this is something that lawyers, the FBI, police, and stuff can watch because I think it pertains to them. But being open minded nowadays, there's all different situations and all different people around the world. Anybody can watch this. Citizens in China, citizens in Ukraine or Russia or wherever. But, so now what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to pat the government on the back. I'm trying to be friendly to them. I'm saying this worked. I collected unemployment compensation, and as a result of that, I was finally offered part-time employment as a freelance writer at a newspaper where I had already worked there. So they did bring me back, and they did not give me a lot of work. I was employed about half the week by them. Now my sleep schedule changed. After this woman did that about a month later, I went from getting only 45 minutes of interrupted rest per night on average to 3 hours and 45 minutes of interrupted rest. Now let me address that. Uh, I've only had one doctor comment on that, a general physician. He seemed to be self-conscious about it. He was in an office and he didn't want other people to know about it. He told me he thought he had experienced sleep problems that he compared to mine at that time in 1988, 89, 90, and so on up until 1998. He experienced sleep problems like that also, and he thought they were good for him. He said he was awake much of the time in medical school, and you know, I guess I have a big mouth. He believed that this situation was anti-cancer. So he thought there's different vocabulary words here, and people are not careful. Deep slumber, dozing, napping, sleeping, sound sleep, blah, blah, blah. These are all different phrases, different vocabulary words. So we're describing different things. If you're doing like security work at night and someone finds you dozing, is that clearly a problem or is that clearly against the regulations or against the rules? Words like napping and dozing do not have the same meaning as phrases like deep slumber and sound sleep. If you found a police officer late at night in his squad car and he was snoring and sleeping soundly, these are all different situations on a case by case basis. I have been at some private security posts where they've said, these are the workers there, they said, that guy can't steal that what you're guarding without waking you up, so it's okay to nap and doze. I haven't been at many security posts where they've said it's okay to have a deep sleep or sound slumber or something like that. So that's why I'm saying to be careful with the details. Now let me get back to this, what I was reporting. Let me just sort of make it clear. The past 10, 15, 20 years, I have been reporting to the government severe headaches, also called migraine headaches, that have badly interrupted my schedule, a daily schedule. Example being, I taught some special needs students in Milwaukee for a short time, and I did some daycare there for a short time. And when I'd get home, I'd pass out on a couch, unconscious, and I wouldn't wake up until the next morning. And right away, I'd have to get going. I'd immediately have to get up and get out the door to get back to the job. And I'm saying I believe, and I've reported this dating all the way back to the 1980s and 70s, that I believe that's artificial sleeping, which is a different phrase from deep slumber, that is caused artificially by some other people in the world, and that it's unfair and invades my privacy. It's been disrupting my daily schedule for at least the past 10 to 20 years. There were several phases before that I've referred to on other videos. The first phase was a sleep phase. It went from 1988 until 1998. The first 1.5 years, I could only get an average of 45 minutes of interrupted rest per night from 1988 until 1989. In the fall of 1989, that phase wore off. What I mean by that is the people causing that problem, they made it easier. They now let me get 3 hours and 45 minutes of interrupted rest. That phase went for 5 years from 1989 until 1994. Then I started getting more sleep in 1994, the fall, and on through 1998, approximately 6 to 8 hours at night of some kind of sleep, but it was connected to throwing trash out and taking garbage bags to gas stations, travel centers, and the governmental village dump, which I like the dump a lot. I made friends at the dump. Some people used my junk and I didn't have to throw it away. So I met people down at the Fox Point dump. A lot of them were interested in my refuse, in my junk, and they would keep it and take it and use it. I'm not a carpenter, I'm not a plumber, I'm not a contractor. So I found in there, as I commonly believe, the passage of time did affect that. It was 10 years of bad sleep problems from 1988 to 1998 that I'm claiming are artificial, and one doctor contradicted it, and he said, well, first of all, nobody's ever diagnosed you as having any illness or disease, but secondly, I had sleep problems, being a doctor in medical school, and I thought they were good for your health. I thought they were anti-cancer. All right, so that's 1988 through 1998. Now, beginning in December of 1994, we'll just call it phase two here in this conversation, I developed a real bad locked up throat and I couldn't swallow food. And my weight quickly plummeted from my normal weight, 225, all the way down to 145. When I look in a mirror, I looked like an Auschwitz victim. I was real skinny. I was as skinny as a rail. This started in December of 1994. The weight part of that lasted until 1998. I put all my weight back on in 1998 and I went back to being 210, 200, 195, 225. So, in other words, most of my adult lifetime, or all of my adult lifetime, I would be considered fat, chubby, husky, overweight, however you want to describe that. But throughout most of my adult lifetime, a common weight for me is between 210 in college and 225 as recently as 5, 10 years ago. Now here I've ballooned out of sight, and as I've gotten older, my metabolism's slowed down, and my body's worn out a little bit. I've ballooned to my highest weight ever, and I'm usually kind of self-conscious about that stuff. I guess I can reveal. I shouldn't be so shy. I have recently ballooned here in 2022 and 21 and 20 in these years. Starting in 2016, I reached an all-time high that year of 255 from too much sedentary, filling out too many forms, and blah, blah, blah. Around in 2020, when my mother died, in 2021 and 22 here, as I've had to fill out all sorts of forms and these videos on the internet and stuff, and I've been sitting down a lot of sedentary. I've set an all-time record with my age, but I have also set an all-time record with my weight. I've gotten up to 280, and I'm normally down at 225, and a man of my height, white Caucasian, my ancestors came over from Europe, Germany, and Poland. I'm supposed to weigh 195 at the height of 6 feet if you don't take age into consideration. So the past several years, I've set an all-time record. I'm up to 280. That's an all-time record. So, I followed the advice. I've tried what I can. As you get older, they say you can't follow your taste buds. You shouldn't follow that your stomach feels hungry. You shouldn't keep drinking that darn coffee. Now, that one, they told me back in 1987 in Eau Claire. I developed the first noise in my head called tinnitus or tinnitus, depending on how you pronounce it. And I went to a specialist, and he's one of the best doctors I've gone to. I just went to him once, and he said, this isn't what you or a lot of Americans think. There's no pill for this. There's no operation. You got a noise in your head. You're afraid it's going to keep you awake at night, called tinnitus. It's from that. You're at the newspaper. You're trying to meet the deadlines. You're drinking a bunch of Cokes with caffeine in them, soda. You know, the syrup and stuff in the soda is ultimately going to make you fat. Then you're got this coffee going all the time, meeting deadlines at the newspaper, wire editing, the weekend editions of the Leader Telegram, at that time circulation 45,000 daily in Eau Claire. So, what was I going to say? I was going to say the doctor there, he said, all I can really do is give you advice. You got to do what we told your mother to do. You got to cut back to 1 cup of coffee a day, and the rest of it can be decaf, and you really shouldn't drink the coffee and the soda. So that's what's causing it with the tinnitus in your head and your rotting teeth and gums, and you've got a massive, colossal. Now you're up in 2022, and you've developed a massive, colossal beer beer belly chest, a coffee gut chest, and like a lot of Americans, you're going to blame your age and all the sedentary sitting down in an automobile and traffic jams and sitting down all the forms connected to the government and private businesses. Just nowadays, it can be a private business, the government, or anything. There's 10 trillion forms where you keep filling out your name and address. And a lot of people nowadays are more confused than ever. This stuff doesn't make sense to them. They now argue with me about my address. This is how dumb this has gotten in 2022. When I write an address down on a form now, strangers come up to me arguing about it, and they want to know if I really live there and blah, blah, blah. You know, the English language has phrases. Residential address, that phrase means that's the place where you live, probably. Now, doing ESL teaching, private security, and freelance writer, and so on, you might be living out in your car sometimes. You might be down at a beach. You might be in motels. You might be, renting somebody's house or apartment. Residential address means that's one where you're saying in that moment, that's where you're at, where you're living. Mailing address means that's the one I'm at. You're asking the idiot, the customer service or whatever. Those people are just constantly don't understand English. I'm just My father and I have repeated English to customer service people all our lives. They just don't understand that language. When you say mailing address, that means that's the one you want them to go with. That's what you're calling permanent address. Another phrase. Permanent address, long-term address, mailing address. Those are all clues that you're telling the idiot at the customer service thing, either on the phone, the computer, or unfortunately in person. I have to talk to those people every day in person. That you're telling them to go with that one if they can understand. Nowadays, they actually argue with you and they go, "Well, you don't really live there. I've seen you, driving around in your car and blah 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 blah." Well, I mean that stuff is self-explanatory. How low can a person's IQ get when it says residential address? It means that's the motel I'm at tonight. When it says, mailing address, I'm saying that's my permanent one. So nowadays they can be in different states, different countries, and but boy, that stuff really trips people up nowadays. Even when you're applying for visas and stuff, and so on. Okay, so let me get back to this because when I don't write it down, I get lost in these, emotional moments and details and stuff. Uh, here's a question again. It's a customer service kind of question. People ask me this stuff all the time. You don't speak Chinese. How could you have been teaching in China? I don't believe you. I've never seen you living at that address. Please, go away. I don't believe you. All right, I'm going to try this again. When I started teaching overseas, the first country I went to was South Korea, and I was as surprised as you are. Because most people, large numbers, thousands of people have asked me about this stuff. How can you travel overseas when you only know one word in the foreign language? Well, I mean, geez, how stupid is the world nowadays? First of all, you have this. This is called your hand. You can just point at stuff. It's like this. A lot of this is visual in life. Whether you're claiming you're a classroom teacher, a writer, or a cameraman, or a director or a script writer, whatever you're claiming, a lot of it's visual. You can just point at stuff. I used to tell people that all the time. Another one is the flip side of this video. I'm saying people around the world know my identity through what a very negative or pessimistic person might call blacklisting, but can also be described as surveillance, either legal or illegal, a business practice or a governmental practice, depending on your point of view. That's why I'm discussing this. If the CIA comes into your home or the KGB and they take out a big gun and they just blow you and your wife away, do you think that's legal? That's obviously very unfair. On the other hand, if some people keep track of you a little through surveillance and they feel they're like a big brother or something or helping you, these situations, each one, even though there's billions of people and billions of situations, each one of those situations is different. They're not the same. So let me get back to this. I know I never answer the question when I'm talking because I get lost in all the details. This is so dumb. I mean, anybody can figure this out. One, they have translators, or they did. 2009, I started teaching in Korea and China. If you go to a bookstore or go some places or somebody in the know or out on the street or whatever, you can get little electronic devices that translate either on their little screen or they have audio. They speak out loud. That's one way that can help you. Another way that I didn't know about, now I've spread it around, I do have a big mouth. They have free translation on the internet. You can translate stuff on there and you can try to get it into your phone, even a $10 phone. You can figure out ways to try to get the English and the Chinese into a $10 cell phone, and you can show it to people or you can try to read it out loud. They also have things like this, which any idiot can figure this out. I just can't believe the things. Sometimes people ask me, this is called a survival Chinese phrase book and dictionary. Even though the library is filled with computer experts and computer users, they must have things like this at libraries, bookstores, travel shops. I'd like to start a travel shop. That's partly why I'm doing stuff like this. I have a foreign girlfriend, and I would need to live in the foreign country, and they brought another red tape regulation at me that now I'm too old to teach. They had me teaching up until approximately 2015, 2016, and then people started telling me they're enforcing the law now. They're cutting people off, foreigners in China, at 55, 60, and 65. Anyway, you take a little phrase book like this in your hand, and you can practice it, look stuff up. Now, I've seen people who are geniuses, like famous rock stars, where they go to these different countries and they just know the foreign language. Well, I'm not on that level. I had a B grade point average in college with a bachelor's degree. So I have to carry stuff like this. I do my own translation. I used to print out paper sheets when I was first in China. I'd go to the free translators on the internet and I'd print. I always insisted on bringing my own printer every place I went because I had the same fear. How do you get by in a foreign country if you can't communicate? That's one of the biggest fears people have. That's right up there with, well, what about the food? These are the two big fears people have traveling to foreign countries is, well, how do you eat? What about the food? And, how do you get along with people or get jobs and stuff because you don't speak the foreign language? So here I'm answering the language thing. They sell translator dictionaries. They have libraries, public libraries all around the world. They have bookshops around the world. Uh, some of them, if you look carefully, they have little electronic devices that translate. I have attempted to find translator apps on the internet, and here's where you could possibly help me. I really, like other people, I have time problems, but um, if you find a translator app on the internet and it fits into your phone and it works, then you've got that. I myself haven't found one, so if you know of a good one, another one, if you find a translator app for your laptop or whatever, or your the foreign country is easier sometimes than the United States. A lot of people in foreign countries cannot afford their own computer. And that's the employer's responsibility. When you go to work in a foreign country, they're supposed to have that set up for you. The computer, it's not a laptop, it's a strong office computer. And you're supposed to be able to have translator apps in there and YouTube in China, it's Beidou, and videos and stuff that's supposed to be available to you. But people ask me stuff like that all the time. They used to ask me, well, you're concerned about blacklisting, invasion of privacy. How do you get hired? How do you go to a job? And then another one is, well, you only know ni hao, you only know one word in Chinese. How did you live there for 5 years, 6 years, or whatever it is? Well, these are all dumb, just completely. I'm sorry it's early in the morning here, but you walk into Starbucks, some people in there speak English. You go to college campuses in foreign countries, some people around there speak English. You take a taxi cab, some cab drivers speak English. And you look around for apps, electronic devices, dictionaries, whatever these are called, foreign language phrase books or guidebooks or dictionaries. They have picture ones and so on. So you get by, but dumb. You just point at stuff. That's how you do it. You see some college students on the street. They feel indebted to me that I've been teaching. You flag them down from the cab. They understand English. This is in South Korea again with me in 2009. And they tell the cab driver where I want to go for me. You just flag them down. You ask the cab driver, he understands. Let's go to this college campus, college. He takes understands. I bring some students over to the cab door and I say, look, my name's Michael. This is my one of my first teaching assignments here in Korea, and I want to go to the train station downtown. And this cab driver doesn't understand. He's trying to take me to a big train station in the suburbs. And you got to be a patient person in life. They'll go. Sometimes they'll say, look, Michael, his idea is maybe the better idea. They have a brand new big train station out in the suburbs. Why don't you let him take you to that one, as he's suggesting? Or the opposite, because these are case by case things. They convey to the taxi driver that I'd like to go to that big old station in the downtown. Either one, they both worked. Sometimes a kid will ride with you. They have chaperone. It's called a chaperone. Of course, if you have a big vocabulary, you get out of more of these problems. Unfortunately, they've told me all along, this is one of my enemies, one of my biggest weaknesses. They've said, look, we've tested you, skills and abilities testing in adulthood, childhood, high school, college, out on jobs, and so on. Your vocabulary is smaller than an average person's. You don't have a big vocabulary. So if we were you, we would not try to work as a writer because your vocabulary is too small. So, but chaperones, they're usually free in China. They're so happy when I was there in 2010, 2012, 2014, 2015, 2016, 17, and 19. Those are years I've been in China. Some of the college kids and high school students are so happy to see an American because they see so few of them, and so happy to see someone attempting to teach them English. that they're willing to ride around with you a little and show you the ropes, chaperone. And occasionally you run into, one of your own fellow teachers or supervisors who's willing to chaperone. There's English speakers all around the world, and they flag you down in airports, on sidewalks and stuff. It's a way of meeting people. That's why it's a friendly thing. They told me to go with this back in school. They told me if you try to go with writer, we just don't have a lot of evidence on that. You didn't write for the school newspapers or anything. I only had two articles published in high school, one in a literary publication and one in the student newspaper. So the high school counselor thought about it and he said, your mother works here as a substitute teacher and a reading teacher, special needs, and in some other schools. So we're going to recommend you go with high school counselor along the white collar lines if you turn out to be white collar in adulthood. If you turn out to be blue collar, we're going to recommend the same as everybody else, the military, back there in the 1970s. I graduated high school in 1976. So the same recommendation as a lot of other people. If you think you're blue collar, we're recommending the military. But if you think you can make it to white collar, we're not convinced any of the students at our high school here are going to make school teacher because you need all sorts of character references and you really should have an A average and be accepted at the School of Education and get a teacher license from the state and internships and blah, blah, blah. That's a lot of bullshit for something like that. So they said, look, now nowadays they probably don't have this option anymore, but they said, look, if you take counselor, he just needs a bachelor's degree and can have a C grade point average or something, even a D grade average. And back there in the 1970s, 80s, you can get hired as a counselor and you just need a bachelor's degree. You can even have a C or a D grade point average. You do not have to be accepted by the University School of Education and blah, blah, blah. So they recommended counselor for me, the drop down from teacher. They recommended teacher for no one. Our high school back there had 2,500 students. Probably half of them were experimenting with marijuana and half of them drank beer or whatever. So they were not going to they're not going to recommend school teachers, School of Education for any of them. I am happy to say that some of my relatives, while they were lamenting the other day that they've never been popular, they did make it through school. I have several relatives who made it through schools of nursing, which I thought were hard to get into. And one of them even got a master's degree. I've never had a master's degree, and I certainly my grades weren't high enough to be accepted in any law school. So they have successfully worked as nurses and nursing instructors. And one of my relatives, my deceased half sister, she was a nursing instructor and had a master's degree in nursing, and she was an instructor at Milwaukee Area Technical College in downtown Milwaukee. My father also worked there in downtown Milwaukee. He was at a place called Schuster's Department Store in downtown Milwaukee for 25 years. He managed a couple departments down there. He was in charge of the camera department, this kind of stuff. Back then, Polaroids, Kodaks, connected to Japan. He was always friendly to Japanese people and whatever they were called back there. And with whether it was Polaroid or whatever or Kodak, I can't remember now. I don't know. He worked the camera department, and he also worked. They used to have record players would play these round discs and very popular music because there was the first ones. Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Mitch Miller. They were just, the Beatles or whatever. So anybody, any idiot can walk in off the street and sell stuff like that back there because they were the first ones. It's like selling TVs. I don't believe my father sold TVs, but those were the first waves of the new foreigners and immigrants coming to the United States and buying TVs and stuff like that. So it's easy to sell that stuff back there. You'd have to find something like that nowadays. So I didn't know anybody who sold TVs, but obviously there was a big wave of TV sales in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on. Coffee. Starbucks has gone all around the world. Now, like I mentioned before in that last tape, I used to be at the downtown place at Harley Davidson, and they asked me to stay there permanently. And of course, when you're a young person, you're a teenager, incredulously, you make weird decisions. If I stayed there, they were willing to make an attempt with me with a CDL. They promised, nothing along those lines. Nobody says to you, well, I think you're a natural driver and you're going to work out. Nobody ever says, they just said, like everybody else, well, that one we're not sure about. We'll attempt to train you on it and we'll see if you can get a CDL license. Forklift, they're a little more confident on. And of course, the mailroom was where I was starting back there. That's why I did it just for the summer. It was very boring in there, so they would take me off it after several hours. I'd come in the morning, probably a coffee or a Coke, and sort mail. And I did this at several companies in Milwaukee and collate stuff and staple it together. And they're always a little, well, you're a college student. We feel you're a little overqualified for this. And also you're a male. We still find we find the female mailroom workers work out a little better for us. They said in the long run, if you stay at Harley Davidson, this was before all these Harley motorcycle shops spread around the world and around the country. We can send you out to the loading dock and then out to the CDL truck driver training. Unfortunately, I decided to go back to college at UW-Madison, so the best answer is just to go along with it and accept the job. And I didn't do that being a teenager or a young person. I said, well, I'll think about it. Thank you. And then when it got to be around September or whatever, I decided at the last moment I have enough money. I'm going to re-enroll at UW-Madison and go back out there to Madison. Sometimes you second guess the decisions that you made. Had I stayed there, I would have had a permanent job at Harley Davidson, and 1/3 of the day in the mailroom, 1/3 of the day as their mailman delivering mail, and then 1/3 of the day out on the loading dock trying to learn this new stuff at that time, CDLs and forklifts and stuff. I should have just stayed there. I made a mistake with that, but a very long time ago, back in the 1970s. All right, so when I write this stuff down, I'll have clearer answers that'll make more sense. The next phase was I was saying my throat was choked shut from December of 1994 until January of 2005. So that's a long time. A common question would be, how do you survive if your throat is choked closed and you can't swallow food and it feels like it has a metal guillotine inside of it? How do you live from December of 1994 until January of 2005? Well, those were miserable years, with a lot of unhappiness and longing for. I would eat only 2 meals a day, and they were lousy meals. They were each meal consisted of was like Star Trek food or outer space food. That's why I'm calling this stuff sometimes a space voice or a cabal of wealthy, powerful people at governments and businesses who spy on people, choke their throats, give them insomnia, and splitting headaches, migraine headaches. This stuff is in science fiction. It's in horror. It's in well, here, this is what this is about. I don't think it's in true crime just yet. So this is the new part of this. That's if you're a lawyer or somebody who works in this with invasion of privacy, electronic harassment, and blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, when I inquired about it back in the 90s and whenever, the 80s, most people would say, well, I really don't work in that. If it's a lawyer or a doctor, And so I really don't have anything for you. I wouldn't know what to do about it. But some people do give you advice. They say just ignore it as best you can, go on with your life, and ignore these threats and harassment. Uh, some lawyers have told me you seem to be handling it yourself. Continue with it, ignore your enemies, and why are they following me down the street? Why are they trying to step on my feet? Why are they grabbing objects out of my hands? Blah, blah, blah. Why does this occur mostly in the United States and not in foreign countries, and so on? Uh, the main things I'm reporting are a little different than that. They're more serious. The first, like I said, I'm initially reporting insomnia, 1988 to 1998, but overall, interrupted sleep and sleep problems, 1988 to the present. That's one. Two, I'm reporting my throat being choked shut from December 1994 until January 2005. That's a 10-year block in there. And then I'm reporting these headaches, bad headaches, tired, drifting off, losing concentration, not being able to keep to daily schedules. That's the past 20 years. This is 2022. We'll just say 2001 until 2022. Headaches at first, tiredness, dizziness, then replaced by the past 10 years splitting headaches, migraine headaches, blah, 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 interfering with schedules and employment. Okay, so when I write, eventually I'll make a better video than this one. But, for now, like I said, my biggest circulation full-time newspaper was in 1987 and 86. I was one of three wire editors at the Eau Claire Leader Telegram. Back in those days, you worked in the newsroom. I'm not familiar with newspapers nowadays. They probably do this stuff like this at home or on the internet or whatever. So there were three of us who worked on the wire. We didn't necessarily know each other or get along with each other. We had different shifts. I was called the weekend wire editor at the Eau Claire Leader Telegram. I was fortunately hired for their brand new weekend editions, which back in those days, a different era, those things were filled with advertisements. So it's not surprising that the newspaper publisher or owner back in those days was usually a millionaire. This was his first Sunday editions. I think traditionally the Leader Telegram had been Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday or something like that. Well, some of these weekend related editions were really just unbelievable for newspapers back then. Sometimes when I was up in Ashland, we'd put out huge, colossal Monday editions filled with stories and some ads. When I was at Eau Claire, we would put out these large Sunday editions, the first ones. They were filled with advertisements. I mean, the company must have had some good money coming in. And Saturday editions with more. So, because people always, they nitpick, they go, well, I never saw your name in the Leader Telegram. Well, they did list a fellow named Bill as the wire editor. He was actually the least experienced of the three of us. I was in the middle, and there was an older woman named, not older, there was a woman who had more experience on the wire than myself and Bill. Her name was Rhonda. So for about 6 months there, after the managing editor left to have a kid and to transfer to a computer company, her husband stayed on as a reporter. This woman, Rhonda, she didn't like that I name her. This woman, Rhonda, was sort of the interim managing editor, and I worked mostly with her. And she doesn't like it, I point this out. She was probably getting paid more than everybody, but it was through overtime. So I was a new hire on the copy desk, but it was understood I did a really good job as a wire editor up in Ashland. So they had me working on the wire the whole time. It was my official title. My titles are always confusing. Up at Ashland, my official title was night editor, which meant it was second shift. But what that really meant was I was the wire editor, and myself, I dummied all the pages for the newspaper in the newsroom on the second shift, up at Ashland, at the Daily Press. Circulation about 8,000 back in those days. I did all the news sections. I did not do the sports section. I had a lot of help from the production crew. Again, we're talking the same people, like Harley people. I worked with the production crew at night. Truck drivers, production workers. They know I have a big mouth. They don't always like it when I mention this stuff back there. So the newsroom and production area were sort of combined, and I worked there second shift at Ashland. Now coming down to Eau Claire, well, they'd heard I did a really good job up in Ashland. They thought I was one of the best wire editors they ever saw. Actually, some of them thought I was the best wire editor they ever saw up there in Ashland. And I decided to go down to Eau Claire, and there were three of us. So the one name, because people are always nitpicking, they always ask the wrong questions. I never seen your name in the newspaper. Well, Bill is listed in the newspaper. I didn't know him very well, and I'm staying away from him a little bit at the company because he is new to wire editing. He was doing something else at the newspaper. So they officially listed him in the newspaper as wire editor, his name. He did the wire in smaller editions that were fewer pages that did not have so many ads in them from Monday through Thursday. All right, I'm new, then I come on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I don't work those days. I work Monday through Saturday sometimes, or Tuesday through Saturday. I get Sunday and Monday off, or something like that, as I recall. I believe I had Sundays and Mondays off sometimes, or Mondays and Tuesdays. So I was what you call, again, they always give me these confusing titles. Night editor at Ashland meant wire editor, or it meant I'm the guy who is writing the newspaper. I was writing all the headlines for it, choosing the stories for it, and dumbing the pages, and blah, blah, blah. There was a daytime editor, and her name was Virginia up at Ashland, and she would have, that what people normally think conventionally in their heads, because they're always asking me the wrong question. The, she's the one that they're talking to. She's like what you call a regular editor, like you see on a TV show. She was in the daytime, and she worked with reporters, and she assigned stories to reporters. That's the way most people are thinking, conventional. I come on at night when it gets dark outside, after dark. That's why I call some of my stuff after dark. So I was second shift. I was not first shift. I'm what you call the night editor. They tell me I'm actually sharper than their daytime editor, but she's local. She lives in the region. She's deceased now. Her name was I believe her name was Virginia Burtness. I'd have to double check. She's deceased. She was in her 60s back then. She assigned the stories in the daytime, and it was somebody else who does that. So people come up to me, man, that paper stinks, and I don't agree. They want to talk to the daytime folks. I come on at second shift. I work mostly with truck drivers and production workers. I'm what you call a night editor. I'm really a wire editor. I'm reading wire stories all night long. I dummy them in holes in the pages. I dummy the pages myself. I write headlines for them. So they thought I was one of the best they ever saw up there at that job, and I stayed a year and I went down to Eau Claire. When I got to Eau Claire, it's the same thing. This guy that they name in the paper, he's new at it. He's like a rookie. He was doing something else there. Maybe he was a reporter or something. I didn't keep track. I stayed away from him a little because he was new. His name was Bill. When people are local, I know his name. When they're local, I try not to name them and stuff like this. These are ways of communicating. That's what that is. This is that, if you listen to this in the background, it's showing people ways of communicating. If somebody's national, I'm willing to name them. If they're local or regional or something, I'm just going to use their first name sometimes. I know his name. I felt he wasn't a good enough editor for me to work with. He was new at it. So I sort of stayed away from him. I was probably supposed to be helping him, and I probably did the first month or two or whatever, but he did not have enough work. When he get older, more seasoned, more experienced, he'd figure out not to give some of his work to us at the copy desk. He can do it all himself when he figures it out. I have 1 year experience, so I'm more experienced than him on the wire. This other woman, Rhonda, has several years experience on the wire, so she's more experienced than me. So I volunteer, I help Rhonda out. That's what the newspaper thought. They had these plans they were, wanted to see. If I turned out to be more of an actor, more of a quiet person, I can sort of work with Bill in the daytime, Monday through Thursday. But I don't want to. He's less experienced than me. I didn't think he was a good enough wire editor, so I'm just going to write one headline for him every now and then, get it off me, and so I help out these other older, more experienced editors in the newsroom with the weekend Sunday editions. Sometimes those smaller papers, the Saturday and Sunday editions, are sometimes completely filled like catalogs with news stories and ads. So I was listed in it. I was not named in the paper. That's true. My official title was weekend wire editor. That makes you sound a little like a slouch, like a sports editor or something. I was actually there most of the time, Tuesday through Saturday, a regular regular work week in the daytime. Then in the weekend, I'd come out on Friday nights and Saturday nights on the second shift again, after dark again. And Friday and Saturday night. I was generally regarded as their top hotshot, wire editor, a new guy, where I might be going through there and I might be going to a bigger paper. That wasn't clear. I mentioned the Green Bay paper and the Appleton paper sometimes, and people said, well, we've never really heard of that. We've never really heard of somebody going from Eau Claire to like Milwaukee or Chicago. We've never really heard of that. And somebody going from Eau Claire to Green Bay, we compete with the Green Bay Press Gazette. We compete with the Appleton Post Crescent. We compete with the Wausau Daily Herald. So you're a little bit nutty with that, Michael. They're not going to hire you at those places because you're their competition. You're knocking them down at the Eau Claire Leader Telegram. They did ask me and another employee, they asked us, they said, look, you guys are a little sharp in here in the newsroom. You're going to get offered some job interviews at the State Journal in Madison and at the Milwaukee Journal in Milwaukee. And this woman is like a friend in the newsroom. She's a what you call a city editor. Again, conventional, what most people think, assigned stories to reporters in the daytime in the newsroom. And she asked me and another fellow, I can't remember his name, he was the business editor. She said, you're both kind of sharp in here. You're going to get offered some job interviews. And she asked us, please don't take them seriously or don't go to them. They're going to cost you 1, 2, or 3 days of work here at what's probably turning out to be your home at the Leader Telegram. You're going to go down there to Madison or Milwaukee or Chicago or whatever and do these job interviews, and they're not going to hire you easily down there. They're not going to hire you, and we're going to be missing you from the newsroom for several days. So they asked us, please don't take that real seriously. You have to talk your way into those places. That takes I applied at the Leader Telegram for 3 to 6 months before I got hired there. So she did turn out to be right. This other fellow, his name was Eric, was a business editor. He did go down and do a job interview at the Wisconsin State Journal, and they didn't hire him like the city editor predicted. And he stayed in Eau Claire at the newspaper for 20 years, and it did cost the company. He was missing. They let me fill in for him on the business page. I edited his business section for him off the copy desk, what they used to call universal copy desk, in the middle of the newsroom. Well, what did I say? Eric's gone today, or the outdoor hunting editor is always out in the woods or whatever. So I'll go over there and I'll work on that for a while, or I'll go over to Eric's place at the business. So I filled in for him. He was gone for 1, 2, or 3 days, like they said. It did, cost the newsroom a little. I filled in for him, was temporary business editor, and then. So we did have contacts. Most of the interest with me was with the Associated Press, and I believe they did 2 rounds of interviews with me and never hired me. And it did, so it had the problem connected to it that the city editor told me. She'll go, "You'll just waste your time on these people and they won't hire you anyway. They're just leading you on." I did have some interviews and some skills testing and stuff at the Associated Press in downtown Milwaukee, at the Milwaukee Sentinel, at the Milwaukee Business Journal, at Northwestern Insurance Company in downtown Milwaukee, and at a nation's largest ad agency, J. Walter Thompson. I was in those places in the early 1980s and the late 1980s, either as a job applicant, a temporary worker, a probationary worker, blah, blah, blah. And it did go, unfortunately, the way this Rhonda woman said. I was either uh, removed or fired, or I was just not up to snuff or whatever. I had a bunch of job interviews down there after I graduated from college in the 1980s, they did not hire me at most of them. When I was hired, I got objections, and I was usually hired through a temporary employment service, and they objected to me anyway and would the longest I did with any of those, I was with the Business Journal in Milwaukee as 3/4 time for approximately 5, 6 months. I did request and have one job interview for full-time permanent, and it had the problem that the Eau Claire Leader Telegram told me about. That guy will not hire you there in Milwaukee full-time permanent, no matter what you do. You can do anything. He's just going to keep wasting your time. So the guy interviewed me at the Business Journal, the publisher, editor, whatever, and he said, you can do anything. You can be Woodward and Bernstein or Walter Cronkite. I'm just not going to hire you here. And he did have a weird thing that pertained to this invasion of privacy, electronic harassment stuff. It's weird. This stuff is weird. He said, look, I know you think that's me doing that to you. I just told you. He gave me a 1 hour interview with him. I'm not going to hire you here permanently full time at the Business Journal, no matter what you do. This is in 1985, the year my father died. He died of cancer, 73, long battle, 1 year, starved to death in the hospital. All right, so back to this. And because, people told me that, and here's the thing where it connects to invasion of privacy and electronic harassment. He said, you're doing that to me, so I'm going to do that back to you. I didn't know what he was talking about. I'm a freelance magazine writer for the Business Journal, and I like it, and I'm asking for a full-time spot. They won't even let me in the building unless I have an appointment to do a job interview with this publisher. They have the same thing in China. This is why I describe these as examples. I walk on a campus in China, I'm unemployed, and the security comes and grabs me and says, no, 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 no. They communicate to me in Chinese. You have to get an appointment with the principal. You have to be on the phone and get an appointment with him first. And when you have an appointment with him and the proper credentials, then we'll let you. A lot of campuses, all of them have security, and they take you away. You have to have Can't I just walk in? Nope, nope. Can't just walk in off the street, ask for a job, even though you're from a foreign country. A lot of places do not have that. They have at least one or a staff of security out there. They will remove you. You have to have an appointment, and even though you don't speak Chinese or whatever, you have to get that guy to give you an appointment on the phone somehow or on the internet or whatever. That's a little what some of this is about. So now back to Milwaukee. That's what that was. It's the same thing. It's in your own country. They would not allow me inside the building of the Business Journal. They would remove me and throw me out of there. I had to have an appointment with the publisher, so I had only one. This is what he told me. He goes, you can be the best writer I've ever seen, and I'm not going to hire you here. And you know why? Because you're doing that to me. He said, well, they have better jobs in Illinois. This is Milwaukee. They have better jobs in Ohio. I'm the publisher here, the editor. They're not going to hire me in Illinois or Ohio, no matter what I do. I can do anything, and they're not going to hire me there. So he goes, Michael, I'm just going to pass it on to you. I'm going to do the same thing to you. Since you're doing that to me, you can do anything here, and I'm not going to hire you on my full-time staff here. In fact, you're not even allowed in the building. So he gave me again, another 1 hour lecture, all these lectures from authority figures. It does say in the teaching stuff, people ask you, how do you teach? At first, you don't know what they're talking about. You walk in a classroom and you start giving a speech like this, and the students just have horrible, sick looks on their faces, and they put their heads down and stuff. And they show you that's not it. They point, they tell you the chalkboard, the whiteboard, whatever. As soon as you write on there, they start nodding their heads. You bring an activity in for them to do where they can participate. Fill in the blank, multiple choice, a video, a movie where they have to talk. Please tell me your name. What is your first day in school like today? Where are you from? How do you pronounce your name? How do you spell your name? Can you tell me a little about yourself, your life, your family, your school, blah, blah, blah. The students, they're real excited. They love that. But you come in, you give them a big speech about China or America or something. Oh my gosh. People just can't stand it nowadays. The world is completely filled with authority figures who have nothing but huge, colossal, monotonous lectures about whatever, a piece of chalk or a chalkboard or a camera or anything. Just awful speeches. The good thing about this is you don't have to watch this if you don't want to, and you can edit it at your house. You can turn it off. You can make fun out of it. You can throw it away. You can keep it. That's what I'm saying. When they tell you they have this in everything, it's not original. It's not copyrighted. It can't be. It's common knowledge. If you bring activities into a learning situation or training, a classroom, or out on the street training truck driving, when you let people do stuff and you bring activities in, their eyes pop open. They have to do something. They have to perform. Please, let's start with you. What is your name? Can you tell me where are you from? What is your first day in school like? Blah, blah, blah. That's it. That's one of the things that works. You go up to the chalkboard, fill in the blank, multiple choice. But you come in like a lot of people do, and you just give some horrible long speech of, I had a terrible airplane flight, and nobody spoke English, and the law says you're all supposed to be speaking English in China, and blah, blah, blah. Just, they have horrible, sick looks on their faces. They've heard this now millions of times. So have I, just millions of times. Well, you don't live at that address. Well, I didn't say that. I'm filling out. Whoa, I'm sorry, sir. You have to leave. You just have to go away right now. There are millions of these around the world. They're just awful. They're horrible. A mailing address and a residential address are not the same thing. And it's private. That's what I'm saying. Where you live, I maybe slept out on the beach that night. I rested in my car. I dozed, whatever. Some of that's private. I had a lot of energy that day. I didn't sleep. I just stayed awake. I was at the library or I was at my job or whatever. That's it. That's, what you're supposed to be doing. And these idiots come up to you and they go, well, Michael, how do you spell that? I have now spelled that millions of times, Michael. Uh, that's what I'm saying is, you know, with all the billions of people in the world nowadays, the red tape, the bureaucracy, you have to fight against it, as we all have. That woman I gave the example of did a very good job. I have many examples like this, so many that I have to write them down, but she did a very good job. She wrote the word blacklist on every single entry, so whatever nitwit or idiot in either the Democrats or Republicans who reads that can understand that any of those companies could have offered me a permanent job or permanent career. So I collected unemployment compensation, and my sleep problem a month later got easier. Instead of getting 45 minutes a night, I was upgraded to 3 hours and 45 minutes a night. Now, a related question that's difficult for me is he goes, well, man, what you're telling me is a mental illness. Insomnia is obviously, you're mentally ill, man. Well, that's unfortunately that's not true. I mean, how dumb do you think I am, or do you think the world is? I've obviously asked doctors, psychiatrists, lawyers, judges, blah blah blah. Most of them do a good job, and they're well educated. Just because you didn't sleep last night, that is not evidence that you are ill, that you have a health problem. That just meant you didn't sleep last night. That doesn't mean that you're ill. I'm saying through dating back to whenever it was, maybe 100 years, through electronic surveillance, unlawful invasion of privacy, unlawful invasion, like conventional examples being the KGB or the CIA, poisoning people's foods, waking people up at night with invisible radio beams or electronic beams, invisible beams from outer space or in a bank or wherever they're from. That's what I was referring to, generally speaking. That's why I say this stuff, FBI and police. Now, fortunately, many people are well educated, and the police are familiar with some of these issues. When they have the budget, they can have a white collar detective who takes phone messages on this kind of thing. Uh, but the police in the United States are looking mostly for street crimes, real severe ones like murder, kidnapping, rape. So you mentioned stuff like this to them. It's sort of a downgrade. It's a lesser level that perpetrators can get away with. So, but so that's what this is about. Anyway, that woman's blacklist thing worked, and I was hired at least part time, and my sleep went to 3 hours and 45 minutes from 45 minutes, and that's back in 1989. Now, my choke throat started wearing off in 1998 after about 3, 4 years. I started being able to swallow all the foods again, and it was loosely connected to my library reading of literary classics and old English, old historical fiction. And so I put my weight back on in 1998 because some people are curious. It's usually my enemy. It's somebody who's not well educated that is wondering about this. Well, you said you only weighed 145. Well, that was from mostly when you round it off from 1995 until 1998. I only weighed 145. And in 1998, I was able to swallow enough food to put my weight back on. And I had problems with what you would call panic attacks in crowded places, inside buildings, in elevators, in automobiles, in traffic jams, in the middle of a park, in the deep woods, out in the wilderness, blah, 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 where my throat would completely collapse, be choked shut like it had a guillotine in it. And I was getting my head chopped off, and my arms and legs and my head and everything are flying around in outer space. Well, this went on from approximately, as I've been saying all along, from December 1994 until January 2005. And it finally, I just had to go with it and start looking for work again. And whatever shape I was in January 2005, that was going to have to be good enough. And because there's always been some of that has always been on me a little. My throat has been x-rayed. I'm not sure. I believe the general physicians. I asked them to X-ray my throat back, I believe, in 1997. During the middle of that, they claimed their X-rays. Again, how dumb do you think the world is? You don't think there might be an operation or whatever. Okay, so I had him X-ray my throat. My request in 1997 was one time. He said, as far as I know, if we find something like a cancer tumor, or you're going to have a heart attack, or you have problems with seizures, or mental illness, you're schizophrenic, we'll call you back with that. Well, nobody ever did. I asked him. He said, he looked at my throat in his office, flashlight and stuff. I don't see anything. We haven't found anything on our x-rays that you are paying for yourself in 1997. Now, the reason I mention that in 1998 that was done automatic. I was at Freighter Memorial Hospital in 1998, and I'm sorry, in 1988, Freighter Memorial Hospital, and it was not ordered by a government law, but it was ordered by the people blacklisting me. They ordered to have my whole body checked out. And I couldn't get out of it. People would say, "Well, don't you fight back? Can't you resist?" Well, I did. I was overcome. If I try to fight back or resist in 1988, I can't breathe. This electronic surveillance or force field or outer space or space voice or whatever you want to call it, if I don't do what it says in 1988 and 1989, it will not allow me to breathe and I collapse. I can't get any work done, can't keep a schedule or anything. My arms and legs are flying around in the atmosphere and so on. That's one problem. Another problem is if I don't do what they say, they only let me rest 15 minutes a night. If I do what they say, they let me rest 45 minutes a night. Then in 1989, it goes up to 3 hours and 45 minutes a night. So I was at Frederick Memorial Hospital. They x-rayed my whole body and the same result. They found nothing wrong. Talk to you for 5 minutes. You're obviously not schizophrenic. You don't seem to have epilepsy. You don't have seizures. We can't find anything wrong with your heart. We don't see anything in your throat collapsing or whatever. We don't find any cancer tumors. We don't find anything. That's it. So I have to go with that. It's blacklisting, electronic surveillance, unlawful surveillance, invasion of privacy, conspiracy, electronic harassment, harassment with people, with thousands of cars passing my car on the right or whatever. So that's what I have to go with. I mean, I met a doctor. He said, "I've talked to you for 5 minutes. I can see clearly you're not schizophrenic." I've never been declared a mental incompetent in a courtroom. I've never had anybody in a courtroom, a lawyer, a doctor, or anybody, claim that I have any kind of illness. I've never been in any clinic or hospital or any place where a doctor has seriously claimed that I have any kind of illness, including all the forms of mental illness. I have been in situations where people have tried to force me to say that I'm mentally ill. I have been in those situations. I haven't gone along with it. As far as I know, I've never or rarely said that. But I've never been in a courtroom where I've been declared mentally ill or mentally incompetent or having cancer or heart attacks or epilepsy or seizures or muscular dystrophy. And I've never been in a doctor's office, a clinic, or hospital where a legitimate medical personnel has legitimately, legally determined that. I have had several attempts the past 10 years, this is what I'm complaining about, where unscrupulous medical personnel, unscrupulous doctors and nurses, like in a Robin Cook movie or Robin Cook novel, where unscrupulous people have tried to force me to fill out on that sheet that I'm mentally ill or schizophrenic. I can't. I mean, there's laws connected to that. They've told me more than once, "I've met you, you're not schizophrenic. As far as we know, you're not mentally ill. We've examined your throat. We've never found anything in it." I don't know if I always believe them on that one, but we looked at your head, your body. We see nothing that's causing insomnia other than what you're telling the police, apparently, or occasionally lawyers or people, that you think it's unlawful electronic harassment or unlawful surveillance or unlawful invasion of privacy that's causing these other problems uh, and again, there's disagreement. It's a case by case basis. Like I said, one doctor, and he probably represents more than one, he goes, "That sleep thing you're complaining about, a lot of people would like to have that. I think that's good for your health. I don't agree that's a medical problem. I don't agree that's insomnia." So right there, some people have said to me, that sleep thing, Well, a lot of people like you who talk or write or whatever would like to have that sleep thing where they could get some work done at night, even though you say you can't keep a schedule in the daytime. The past 10 years, so people have told me that when you're complaining about that sleep thing, some people would like to have that. I have did sit next to a man at a small newspaper who volunteered for the sleep thing, a couple of them because they wanted to get more work done. One would just stay in the newsroom and not sleep at night and continue working. I've seen that a couple times in newspapers. And another one would sit next to me and he's volunteering for that. He wants what I'm calling insomnia, or what I'm calling where my face is all white as a sheet and I have a headache and I'm dizzy, and they let me rest several hours last night, and I only got 1 hour of sleep, and I was driving garbage around all night long. And this has gone on for years. I think you can understand why I'm complaining about that. People have seen me now at thousands of travel centers, convenience stores, gas stations where my face is white and puffy, and I look like I got 1 hour nap someplace. That's controversial. I mean, I just admitted it here. To me, some of that back in the past was unlawful invasion of privacy, causing a severe health problem or health risk. To some other people, they said, well, but you can get more work done at night then, or you should be able to, or, whatever. You're raking the yard, mowing the lawn, writing news stories, blah, blah, blah. So that one's controversial. I think there's some truth in that if you don't sleep soundly, I guess I haven't been a sound sleeper since 1987, and I was not perfectly a sound sleeper in young childhood in elementary school. So people said, well, that sleep thing goes both ways. Some people would like to have that problem, and as you've seen, they've even volunteered for it at some of the publishing companies you've worked at. Some people just stay awake and work on it all night long because they don't think the quality of it is very high. So they say to themselves, well, they're not going to keep me on here off the quality of it, so I'm just going to stay awake all night, go to that truck driver restaurant over there and blah blah blah. By the way, I was saddened to hear that they put some kind of device on the truck driver's dashboard where uh, they try to order him. He can only drive 8, 10, 11 hours a day. Some of them, they're better off to let them. Some people are just made just to rest for 5 hours, and when you go to the government nowadays, you have to pretend that everybody's the same and everybody needs 8 hours of deep slumber. Okay, when you get done with that bullshit, you can go back to the real one. I've generally been a jobber. A jobber is somebody who does two or more jobs at the same time. So I'm not what's regarded as someone who has an occupation or a career. I'm regarded as someone a jobber, where in let me think. In the daytime, I was grading school papers for a school project in Houston for Maryland, and then at night I was going out to security posts. So I would be what you call a jobber. Or as in Milwaukee, I would go to temporary agencies, and I'd go to, well, okay, when I was in retailing, I'd work at Sears full time selling men's clothing and shoes. Then I'd go to my father's mom and pop retirement luggage shop at night or over the weekend and help my elderly father in his 60s and 70s there with his retirement shop selling luggage. So I was a jobber. I'd work at Sears part of the time selling clothing and stuff. Then I'd drive 30 miles away to Colony Case Luggage Shop and sell luggage and travel items out of there. So again, I've gotten way lost with all the description and emotions and details, which is why it's better if I write this down and can get to the point faster. I am somebody who, like the old newspapers used to say back in the 70s in college, feels he's been under unlawful surveillance from the CIA, the KGB, rich businessmen, millionaires and billionaires, government people, authorities, and of course I get the same lectures. I'm objecting a lot in this thing, even though this is sort of a lecture. you're not required. You can shut it off or throw it away. But nowadays, this world, billions of people, some are just absolutely horrible at communicating, and they give you a huge lecture and speech about this or that. All kinds of people nowadays cut out of stuff like that. You just leave, you just walk out of it, you hang the phone up. I mean, I have 5, 10 hang-ups a day where they're trying to, it's automated, they're trying to sell me something. I get dozens of those every day. Surprised I left one of them on over there, and I finally didn't hear it ringing for a while. So, but then this is this attempt at this today. Now it's 8:32 in the morning. So people asked you how is some of that stuff resolved? Well, the sleep problem wore off a little over a period of 10 years from 1988 to 1998. I still have interrupted sleep, but I can sort of get 6, 8, 9, 10 hours, whatever. The choke throat gave way a little after several years, and it was overall a 10-year problem with all the panic attacks and stuff out in cars, traffic jams, the wilderness, the middle of the park, the office, the elevator. I still get those somewhat, but not nearly as bad. Those were quite severe. People knew about them. My throat was snapping and popping, like in a line in a store or in the library, at a checkout cashier counter. Again, customer service. Your throat's choked shut, and you have some idiot at a cash register, customer service, and your throat's snapping and popping, and they're going sir 100 times, and dude, and man, and the gentleman, and they're among the ones that give you huge speeches that I can't do this and I can't do that. And I have all sorts of regulations, and you can't buy that, and that isn't your address, and I don't know how to spell your name, and I've never met you, and I don't know what privacy is, and I don't know this, and I don't know that, and I have to have credentials, I need to have proof what's your identity, and I need to know. Wow, Charles Dickens actually put them in his novels to try to reduce some of that. He put the word clerk in his novels to try to get them to stop some of that. Those people are under horrible, strict laws where, when I was at Sears, I worked at Sears twice. They were good enough to take me back. The second time they hired me around in approximately 1991, early in automotive. And I would go up to these folks, now, okay, now I have some spare time selling tires and batteries. Can you help me out here? Can you just show me, let me get familiar with the cash register? And it's the same people again. They go, no way, man, I'm going to report you to the boss. You're supposed to know the whole thing, and you're supposed to be my supervisor, and blah, blah, blah. You know what they did at Sears? I walked in one day, and every single one, this has happened to me more than once, every single one of those people was gone. They removed all of them. They were just horrible. I had the sleep problem, 3 hours, 45 minutes a night. My face is white. I'm coming into Sears to sell tires and batteries for them, partly on commission because I get paid more that way. They just had it built in. They don't want to cooperate with somebody like me. So I had to learn the cash register through the Sears book and whatever, official little training they had. But they're supposed to be letting me familiarize out the cash register. Well, they are just horrible. The same thing again. They were horrible when I was a customer. They'd go, I don't have that screwdriver, man. Look, dude, you're going to have to hire a painter crew. I mean, they just start giving you lectures and speeches about stuff, and so I walked in one day in 1991, early in that round. Sears took me back my second time there. The first time I was in men's clothing and shoes. Shoes had big money in commissions, and now I was in automotive. They probably fired every single one of those people. They're just awful. They were supposed to be showing me the cash register in my spare time, and I know I have a Sears cash register book. They're supposed to be letting me practice on it and stuff. The way they let me practice on it is Sears probably fired all of them. I looked around the store. I never saw any of them again. I went to another Sears at Northridge. I never saw them at that Sears. I don't understand people like that. My father worked at Schuster's for 25 years. He's happy to show people things. How does the camera work? How do you put the recording disc or album or whatever you call it? How do you put it on the record player? How do you plug the record player in? How does that work? Well, these people they hire in customer service, some of them are just horrible. I mean, they should have horror movies about them. It's just, I don't believe your name is Michael. I've never seen you live at that place. Well, you're a liar. You're not telling the truth. And I have all sorts of laws and rules, so you'll have to leave, sir. You'll have to leave. You know, they've called the police on me at least 3 times that I know of. I'm just standing there most of the time. I'm just standing. That's legal to stand. It's also legal to talk and express opinions. If you punch or attack a person, like with a knife or a gun, that's what the police are for. That's what they're interested in. That is illegal. If you're just standing in a line, you're just standing there. You're not even talking. They've actually called the police on me just standing. I mean, this is a little what I'm reporting in here. I was standing in a bank. They had a real long line. They were embarrassed. I was like 17th out of 30 people. So out of embarrassment, customer service, clerk, whatever that jerk or idiot is, they actually called the police because their line in Bayside, Wisconsin at the bank was too long. So I'm just standing there. I've just been standing there. Someone taps my shoulder. I turn around. There's all sorts of blinking emergency flashers out in the parking lot, and it's a policeman, the police chief of Bayside. He asked me to go out to the parking lot with him. He then starts talking to me about a little different subject, and I return back to the line. I explained to him the same thing. I'm just standing there. I'm not even talking. They've called the police because they're embarrassed that their line is so long. And they've done stuff like that before. I was in a medical clinic. A doctor had cleared me. And it's not a law, it's not required. The country of China was trying to be diplomatic, friendly to the country of the United States. So they asked me to visit a doctor for recommendation. Is Michael satisfactory to fly international airplane flight? So this doctor, I went to him a couple times. He concludes I am. He gives me his medical checkups the same as other doctors. Look fine, no problem. Well, unbeknownst to me, what he never told me, he wrote a complaint letter to the state of Wisconsin saying he thought I was psychiatrically insane and that I should be locked up in a hospital for the rest of my life. I should be permanently institutionalized. So he mailed this letter to the state government in Wisconsin, and they had one man there who picked up on this. This man, this is a little what this is about. Lawyers told me to ignore this because none of this is enforceable by the law. I received communications from a man at the state government based on that doctor's letter that I was an insane person who had murdered 300 people in Wisconsin. And lawyers, have advised me not to go into the details of it because your enemy can get at it. But one example is he claimed that I had been intentionally writing badly, typing badly on a computer, even though I was not doing that for a living. I was mostly unemployed, and I was mowing yards, painting houses, and I was also teaching English where I was employed in China and South Korea. And when I returned to Texas, I was doing private security down there. So he wrote a letter to the state of Wisconsin, and they concluded that I had murdered. I do know the exact facts, and I've been advised by lawyers not to reveal them so that the enemy has to investigate or figure it out themselves. So I received a complaint from the state of Wisconsin that I had murdered at least 150 people by intentionally typing badly on a laptop computer. Well, first of all, don't even do that for a living anymore. That's back in the 1980s when I was at newspapers, and they didn't have laptop computers. They had office computers in the newsroom, And out in the production area, the loading dock, they had work employment office computers back in those days. So this is obviously a farce. This guy's just harassing me, and he's got some gripe against me. So I called up lawyers, and they said it's not a serious matter. He's not claiming you took your car and ran over 150 people, and he's not claiming you've been found guilty of anything ever, and he's not claiming you've ever been in prison. He's just saying his opinion. You've been writing badly, whatever that means. That's all subjective. Those are all opinions. You've been writing badly, whatever that means, on a computer tube. Therefore, you've inadvertently murdered 150 people. Therefore, you're a murderer. Therefore, blah, blah, blah. So I was in this medical clinic of this doctor asking him. I went in there, when I had spare time. And I asked his receptionist, one or two of them out there, nurses, you mind when he's in between patients, can I just talk to him and ask him about this? And they said, sure, yeah, no problem. So I'm just sitting there waiting, and all of a sudden some police officers walk in. And again, they take me out to the parking lot. We get out there at the parking lot, and apparently those two nurses in there called the police in that community for disturbing the peace. Well, I wasn't disturbing the peace. I was just sitting there. I'm just sitting. I'm not talking. I have no friends there or anything. I'm waiting to talk to a general physician where none of this is binding. None of this is a law or anything. I'm waiting there to talk to him, ask him why he wrote a letter to the state of Wisconsin complaining about me, that I'm a murderer or that I'm psychiatrically insane or that I should be permanently institutionalized. I was just going to ask him. His nurses agreed with it. They said, sure, when he's in between patients, you can ask him why he wrote a letter that you're psychiatrically insane and you should be permanently institutionalized and blah, blah, blah. I said, sure. Well, after 45 minutes of waiting there, a group of three police officers from that community walked in. They tapped me on the shoulder again. They pretended to agree with the nurses right away, disturbing the peace, took me out in the parking lot, and they talked to me about a different subject. I will now reveal so it's not mysterious. Even though people have told me you shouldn't reveal because it's your enemy, well, I have no problem with it. They ignored that thing in the building, in the clinic, like lawyers have told me on the phone. I've asked lawyers, why won't you come down to the courthouse and represent me? And they'd go, no, no, no. You're going to go down here yourself. You represent yourself better than I do. And so far, they have nothing on you. You haven't been in prison. You've never been found guilty of anything. You say you're the victim of crime, the victim of electronic surveillance, not the perpetrator of crime. So they must have your identity confused with, with Trump or Biden or somebody those people have committed millions of inadvertent murders or mass murders or genocide or whatever they're talking about. They're trying to accuse me of committing genocide at a local medical clinic, and most of my relatives work as nurses, and they have higher IQs than I do. They get higher grades than I do, and one of them had a master's degree and blah, 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 blah. I had a B grade point average in college and a bachelor's degree in print journalism. So according to that, I've been committing mass genocide, even though I've been unemployed for 20 years and I don't have an occupation or anything most of the time. So the police in that incident take me out. I've been in so many incidents, I have to write them down now. The police took me out in a parking lot and they said, just ignore that in there. We know about it. I'll finally tell you because people have told me don't tell them because they're your enemies out there. They'll try again. They'll try another time. All right. Well, they can. They've tried dozens of times. So far, I have not served time in prison. And as far as I know, I am not a felon. I have been investigated for felonies and misdemeanors. And, the lawyers, though, have said, don't admit anything because you've never been found guilty of anything. So you don't have to admit anything. There is no law or anything. So they took me out in the parking lot and they said, we've seen you going to the health club over there in the shopping mall. As you go to the health club and the shopping mall, more and more these incidents will recede. They'll go away more. So they told me this in 1 minute. Then they said, "Sorry to bother you, thank you," and that was it. So it's not real mysterious. They have asked me. They've often done this. They've asked me to behave aggressively in obtaining and maintaining an employment. And they've also asked me to work out at health clubs and stuff and get more exercise. Like the original specialist in Eau Claire asked me in 1987 with the tinnitus, the noise in the head, can you cut back on that with the caffeine? And I went out jogging that year. That was the last year that I went jogging. People are very sad when they see me. Some of them have sad looks on their faces. They go, Jesus, Jesus, I haven't seen that Mike guy jog since 1987. 87 to 2000, that's 13 years in there, and now to 22. The last time I was a regular jogger out on the street was 35 years ago, and I was asked by a specialist with the tinnitus, that's it, go out walking and jogging, and you'll sleep through that thing and it'll gradually go away. People ask me because I miss the like other motor mouths. I miss the outcome. They go, well, what happened? What was the outcome of that? I went jogging in 1987, and it went the way the specialist said. I slept through tinnitus. I ate through it. I worked through it at my job, and it never caused any problem. Not even a schedule problem. I slept soundly in Eau Claire. I'd have a buzzing or ringing in my ear at night. I'd fall asleep 8 hours, 9 hours, whatever. I followed the doctor's advice, reduced the cokes with the caffeine in it, reduced the soda, like a lot of doctors and dentists have told me, and reduced caffeinated. I was lying a little or making a mistake. This is half decaf. I mix some decaf with some what they're calling coffee nowadays. Does not have much caffeine in it. And this, by the way, is another way of getting out of it. I just talk through breakfast rather than eating anything. So, Yahoo, good for me. I'm up at 280 pounds. I'm supposed to be 195. It's now 8:49. I just talked through breakfast, like a lot of people have been told. So back there in 1987, I would go jogging through lunch or whatever, like he's telling me, you're overweight a little, you know, most of your family, you lean white collar with nurses and mailroom worker and reporter and retail sales clerk and so on. You guys lean white collar. You're all sort of chubby and overweight and fat in your family relations. And unfortunately, you've had a number of cancer deaths, but fortunately, most of them have been in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. But some of the friends, people you've known, and some of your relatives and in-laws have died in elementary school, high school, young adult, 35, 12, whatever, all different ages, a case by case deal. So the specialist said back then, just get more exercise, get outdoors, ignore those people harassing you connected to the newspaper. Most people are good people. Most good people don't harass you. They don't tailgate your car. They don't claim you're committing mass genocide because you accidentally made a wrong turn or that's what these people are saying. They're not. I don't run into them most of the time, but here's something you think Hollywood would want to make a movie about. You just made a wrong turn. And the guy goes, "Go, darn you! I'm gonna kill you." I've been told that. I was doing security at Save-A-Lot grocery stores in Houston, a daytime shift, and people told me this will happen. I was armed, and guys would walk in there at the cash register, three, and they go, "Man, I see you in here again. I'm gonna blow your head off." I've seen that out at security posts. I've heard that. Dude, man, sir, the gentleman, Michael, Mr. Michael, blah, blah, blah. Uh, you're fired. I'm going to blow your head off. No. Go away. Get out of here. I'm calling the police. I believe they've called the police on me at least a dozen or a couple dozen times. And I've probably only known about it three, six times. I can't even keep track anymore. And when they get there, they just pretend, it's the same thing. They pretend to agree with it. We go out in the parking lot and they go, come on, let's hit that health club out there, get some of that weight off, and we'll stop this bullshit with that. You were disturbing the peace in there when you were just standing. People double check. What were you doing? Well, I just stood there. I was just standing for 25 minutes. They're probably embarrassed with a lousy job they do. And whatever they're calling that a job, that should be automated. I've been at places where they've taken my side, and I'm sorry. People are people. I'm sorry. I walk in one day, they just fired all of them. They didn't make sense. Every time you try to do anything, well, I have a perfect law that you can't put the paperclip down on my keyboard. You have to get away from my cash register, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And you have to stand in line, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And there's all sorts of laws and all sorts of rules. And my gosh, I've watched dozens. My father was nothing like that. He worked in retailing for 25 years. He was very happy to sell products to people. He would get paid commissions. So would I. One third of my income in the 1980s when I worked in retailing was the commission on selling shoes. So I want to sell them. I don't want to tell the customer, well, it's illegal, dude. You're not allowed to wear that shoe. Well, what is that? That's what they were calling a salesman or something. What is this? You got a guy and you're supposed to sell him the sports coat. And instead, these people are the opposite. They go, I'm calling the store manager. I'm calling the police. You're not allowed to wear that sports coat. Where do they get these people from? I can't believe this is real. Don't they want to make a movie about that or write a book about it or something? I've never met a U.S. citizen who has not encountered that. Everybody has run into that, and it's ridiculous. You can't drive down that street. Get out of your car. The police have given me orders. I ran over their cones once, and I was following their orders. I just left. I got out of there. They're forcing me. There's fog out. They're making me drive backwards. I ran over their cones or whatever. I just got out of there. They were gonna give me a citation for following their orders to run over their stupid street cones. Can't they understand, like this video is saying, with electronic surveillance and activities, isn't it better if you try to hold a conversation with a person to let the other person participate, to listen sometimes, not to give people dictation? The Chinese students have told me, because I've used this activity, dictation is an activity. You have a book like this and you tell them the English and Chinese words, you show them pictures, and you dictate. Write it down on paper, blah, blah, blah. The students always tell me, oh, they shake their heads, oh, I have a headache. We don't like dictation. Well, neither do customers. Like I said, I sold luggage, I sold men's clothing and stuff. Uh, I'm sorry, most of the time the white collar management has taken my side, and I just come in one day and those idiots all got themselves fired, and they did not make sense. I mean, I look at this hat. You see this hat? I look at this and they go, get your hands off that, man. You're not allowed to buy that hat. Okay, the other day I shaved all my hair off. I've been shaving my hair off since 2019. The pandemic started in 20. I decided the movie cinemas were closed, the schools and stuff were closed, the pandemic. So I decided to start cutting my own hair off. I found the easiest way when you do it yourself, you cut it all off. Within 1 month, enough of the peach fuzz or sandpaper has grown back that it looks okay, it looks good from a distance. Within 2 months, it's sort of normal. And within 3 months, you have to make a decision. It's already over your ears in 3 months, and you have to decide you're going to clip it yourself again or you're going to go to a barber. So you run into these idiots on these customer service jobs. That's what that children's movie Minions is probably referring to. You know, Charles Dickens tried to deal with them. He put them in his novels to make them feel important to see if that would work. They had that back in those days. Well, you can't drink that tea. Only British citizens who own land and have over $1 million or pounds or whatever can drink tea. Well, put that tea down. You're not allowed to drink that. I've never met anybody who has never had an experience like that. You're just minding your own business. Get that coffee out of your hands. You're not allowed. People have grabbed things out of my hands. You're not allowed to eat that candy bar. Get out of here. I'm calling the police. You're not allowed to cut the hair off your head. I'm calling the police. I believe they've called the police on me a couple dozen times, and most of the time they don't even show up. When they do show up, it's behind my back. They tap me on the shoulder and they talk to me about something else. They go, "Please, let's now get in better shape here. You know, you've never taken any criminal justice classes, even though you've done private security. Let's work out now. Let's get in better shape." And then some of that in the lobby with that idiot nurse or that stupid receptionist, or I have to criticize these people the most. Those people they call sales nowadays, customer service, they are completely horrible. They're the worst I've ever seen. You see this? This is a bottle of water. Isn't it? Don't you want to sell this to somebody in order to keep your job, like at Love's or Pilot or Sears or Walmart or anything? What you get nowadays, like at Walmart, they don't even have the job. They gave up on it. There's some idiot with like a forklift or a pallet jack mover or something, and he's throwing products on the shelves. And he doesn't care if you buy them or not. That's Walmart nowadays. Uh, well, geez, back in our days, you know, if I sold this to you 40 years ago, I got paid a little percentage of it. I got some extra money, up to 30%, if I sold this to you. So I'm obviously interested in that, something like this. I'd like to have a sponsor, subscribers. I'd like people to be able to pay to set up a website and so on. So this is another one. My enemy is the only one that would comment on this. Most people don't comment. They're polite and they obey the laws and they obey the rules. You shave your hair off, within 1 month it looks normal from a distance and it looks fine. You're temporarily a skinhead for about 2 days. After several days, you've got some sandpaper and peach fuzz. After a month, it looks normal again. At 2 months, you can start to decide, do I want to go to the barber or clip it again? Okay, most people are flexible. They understood the English of what I just said. You run into your enemy, though. Your enemy doesn't understand it. He goes, "I'm calling the police. You're not allowed to shave the hair off your head." Well, most of the time, I don't even know about it. People told me that. You know, they started telling me that in the early 1980s. Hey, man, that bartender phoned the police 3 hours ago and blah, blah, blah. Most of the time, they won't even come out because I'm trying to explain to you, in case you're one of the idiots. I hope you're not. If you're not one of the idiots, I'm giving you an example. I'm telling you there's other people where it's happened to them. I'm also telling you how to deal with it. Most of the time, and this is in movies and TV shows, you just stand there or sit there and you don't say anything. And the police understand most of the time the one that's quiet, that's just standing there, is probably innocent. He probably was not disturbing the peace. If you're one of my enemies, I'm trying to explain it to you. If you kill a person with a gun and there's evidence, the police, or to a lesser extent, private security, can come out for that. If I just have a complaint on the phone or whatever that I don't like somebody or they're loud or whatever, most countries around the world, you have to handle that yourself. So let's take like I think it was the George Floyd incident or the Rodney King incident. Let's use that one. This is a little what this invasion of privacy stuff is about. Uh, Derek Chauvin choked George Floyd to death by sitting on his neck with his knee in his hands for approximately 9.5 minutes. Now, he doesn't even need to go to work that day. That's where people like me come in. Let's say that Derek Chauvin is more reasonable, in a better mood that day. He just, he can ask for a transfer. He can just tell them at the office that he's been in these poor communities for a long time, for many years, and he's had enough of them and he'd like to be transferred out to a small town or out to the suburbs. Another one is he can say, well, there's a pandemic going on and I don't need to come in today, blah, blah, blah. If he's out on the street and there's some suspicion of counterfeiting, he's really not following the rules. The rules on that, because I get big speeches from these people that I'm a lawbreaker also. The rules on that are that you need to have evidence that a crime has been committed. So if someone comes up to you and there's a camera rolling and they shoot you with a gun and there's blood and a bullet in your body and a surveillance camera was rolling, there's some evidence, the police can come out for that and they can attempt to adjudicate it. If you're a private security or police and there's just some people arguing, you have to be very firm if you want to go out for that. And you have to explain to them, look, I don't have any evidence of anything. You're just talking loudly or something. That is not clearly against the law. So I'd like to ask you to behave politely, not to touch each other, not to grab other people's objects, not to call people names, not to harass them. That's a little what this whole thing is about. You don't have to tailgate cars. 1990, I look in my rearview mirror. The police decided we're able to do something about it. They had been tailgating me for a couple of years, several years. I didn't know why. I looked in my rearview mirror one day in 1990 on the freeway. There were about half a dozen state patrol cars back there, and they just pulled all those nitwits over to the side of the road. Each one of them was going to take a turn driving within 1 foot of the rear of my car. They were then going to pass it at 90 miles an hour or 100 an hour on the right. Most of the time they're real poor people. They're usually male. They're usually white, Caucasian. It's usually 1 to 4 white male Caucasians, usually teenagers or young adults. And they're extremely poor. They don't have anything in their car. No food, nothing. It's an old beater. They're going to drive within 3 feet, 1 feet of my back fender. They're going to hang out in the blind spot to bother me. Then they're going to zip past at 100 miles an hour. I'm sure a lot of us have seen that. One day I looked in my rearview mirror and the cops knew about it. I probably mailed them a letter or stopped in and told them about it at the state patrol and at the local Fox Point police or Milwaukee police. And they just took all those idiots and pulled them over to the side of the road. Now, what did the police get out of that? They got something permanent out of that. They were able to establish some long-term speed traps that have been there for decades. And they pull one of those idiots over every now and then. It's the same thing. It's somebody real down and out. They're driving a small, unsafe beater. My grandfather sold cars. He again, here's a tip. He would only sell safe cars. He would tell people this. He was a car salesman for 50 years. He had 1 wife, 2 daughters, and a nice suburban home in Fox Point. 50 years selling Buicks for rank and son. And one of the sales points he would make, I have to always do this where I don't give away top secrets, but one of the sales points he would make when I saw him a little down there was he really wants to sell them a 4-door car because if you're in a head-on crash or something, you don't want to get killed. Those little whatever those are called, economy cars or whatever, those things that are like golf carts and stuff. While they do save on gas and they seem cheap in some ways, what to point out is if you got hit by that with a truck or something, you're part of the cemetery. So my grandfather would point that out to people. He was not willing to do demonstration rides in two-door vehicles. This is back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. He sold cars for 50 years. He's not going to go in any two-door vehicle to do a demo ride. He'd hand them the keys. He'd make a joke to them like the keys stunk. Like he'd go, ah, you're going to take that for your own demo ride, and when you run into the wall, idiot, that's going to be your own fault. That's a way of selling a car. Just you have to cut back your budget. You have to come up with the money to support your family, and you need a family four-door vehicle, like we see in the United States now. A lot of them, those two-door things, when they're in crashes, are going to get slammed. That's what that is part of the time. So the police got some permanent speed traps out of that when they can go and pull over a dozen people all at once with the state patrol. They can then keep a permanent speed trap there, and it's the same people that they're giving the tickets to. You see them out at night, blah blah blah. Same thing. The guy doesn't have a job, doesn't have any money, or has nothing. His car's empty. It's a small two-door job, and well, now he's getting another traffic citation. So, you know, um, so let me see here. See if I can answer some stuff. I know I have a lower IQ than a lawyer, so this has gone on way too long for lawyers. What you do, you listen to this in the background. It's like wallpaper back there. And every now and then there's a flash of brilliance or something. A literary agent told me that. He was a lawyer also. He had graduated. People ask me what happened with that. I will answer this now that it's 2 hours in. So I don't interfere with the sales of books when I'm committing mass genocide and murdering people all over the world. And I've been if you want to hear my point of view, I've been unemployed for 20 years. I'm not a doctor. When I go awake at night, I don't know why that's happening. When I can't swallow food normally for 10 years, I don't know why that's happening. Let me answer that. The law said telephone in 1997, so I did. Most psychologists and psychiatrists in the Milwaukee phone book, like 99 out of 100, said, "We've never heard of that, Michael. We don't know what to do about it. I can't put you on my patient list. I can't help you. I don't know what to do about it. You say your throat is choked shut. You can't swallow one bite of a green lettuce leaf. You can't swallow one bite of a piece of white bread." And this is mostly in 1995, 96, and 97. So this is 97. The law required me to phone them, and I did. I phoned all of them, most of them in the Milwaukee phone book, and most of them, 99%. Gee, I feel sorry for you. I've never heard of that, sir. I don't know what anything I could do that could get you to swallow the ham sandwich, or I'm sorry. Now, a small percentage of them said, yes, we have heard of that, but unfortunately, our patient list is full. I'm moving to Madison, Wisconsin. I'm taking my practice to California, blah, blah, blah. So I never could hook up with a psychologist or psychiatrist who could approach it that way, a private job. And some of them said to me, I'm too expensive for you. You don't have the kind of money that. And secondly, they said, I'm moving. I'm not going to let you on my patient list. But the most common one, by far and away, I'm sorry, Michael, I've never heard of that. I wouldn't know anything. Maybe you need a throat operation to open it up. I don't know. I've never heard of that. So what happened there, I was not able to obtain anyone, and I've never taken any medical testing, like with x-rays, doctors, or anything that's indicated that I have a mental health problem or emotional problem. Now lawyers have told me it's smarter for you not to reveal that. They've told me that whole thing you're doing there, it's bad for you because your enemy can use it against you because you're telling them things. And they spend a little time with me. They go, have you ever been found guilty of a crime in a courtroom? No. Has a judge or jury ever found you guilty of anything? No. Have you ever served time in prison? No. All right. They've said it's not the best strategy with your conversational oral English approach to discuss this stuff in public because you're giving your enemy ammunition. They've tried a number of times to sue you, to put you in jail, and so on. And you say most of these things get thrown out before they even get to the courtroom. They don't even have enough evidence. Okay, I'm not supposed to admit this. I've been arrested several times, but I've never been found guilty of anything. It's probably along these lines of disturbing the peace. Uh, the first time, I think, as I recall, I know the date and the year and stuff. I'm not going to reveal it because that's what lawyers have told me. But the first time the mistake the police made, they made a lot of mistakes. I received a letter of apology from the government. They said, we know the police. They sent me a letter of apology. They said, the police failed to charge you with a crime. They failed to charge you with a specific crime. You asked them their names, ranks, what police department they worked with. They failed to tell you any of that. You asked them why you were being arrested. They didn't tell you that. You asked them if you could telephone a lawyer. They would not let you telephone a lawyer. You asked them why were they arresting me, where are they taking me, dozens of questions. They didn't answer any of them. So the letter said they were an oversight agency, white collar of the street police. The two police officers who arrested me that year, and I do know the year, and I do know the approximate date, and I do know the place. And lawyers have told me, since you've never been found guilty of anything, don't reveal it. All right, so I reveal it without revealing it. That's the example this sets. I was arrested back there decades ago, and the incident was thrown out and erased because, one, I was not Mirandized, which means they weren't really charging me with a crime. They were just suspicious about something. Two, I was not charged with a crime. So I received an apology letter. The police did keep me in confinement for about 4 or 5 hours, and it was not in a jail cell. And so about 3 months later, I received I was going. I had my way. I wanted to sue the police department, and I was not allowed to. I was given intimidation, threats, coercion, blackmail, whatever you want to call it. If I try to sue them, I can't breathe air. I'll have my air supply cut off, and I won't be able to sleep at night. I'll get only 15 minutes. So I can't do anything about it. So about 3 months later, just out of the blue, I called them, well, how do I pay for this incident? And they go, you don't pay for it, we erased it. Because they're the government, they can do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. They're minor incidents. They're just picking you up on suspicion of something. You don't pay for it. We erased it. We apologize. They apologized on the phone. The police didn't Mirandize you. They didn't charge you with any crime. There were two police officers. You asked them dozens of questions. They didn't answer any of them. They didn't tell you what their names were, what department they were with, and blah, blah, blah. So we apologize. They sent me two letters, two copies, letter of apology, and the incident has been erased. There's no record of it. That's one. Another one's about a year later. Most police officers are friendly to me. About one third. About one third are neutral, and about one third are sort of my enemies or out to get me. And they've explained to me why. I think you're a reporter for the Houston Chronicle. Therefore, I'm going to try to arrest you out at this security post or out at this construction site because I want them to throw you out of that, and then you're going to get hired at the Houston Chronicle or Milwaukee Journal. Well, okay, my enemy has told me that. Most of them are friendly, and they see I'm not committing any crime. I'm just standing there. I'm not talking. I'm not doing anything. One of them did give me a little speech. You have to act friendlier, which I've been advised all along to be an oral English conversationalist. I think this is friendly. This is just water, by the way. Okay, so if you're a lawyer, police officer, law enforcement, and I've gotten this across to you, or if you're anybody in any occupation, or if you're unemployed, because I said I've been unemployed for 20 years. if you're anything, you can have this on in the background. I'm unfortunately I'm not able to charge for it at the moment. What I'm saying is that I can get enough subscribers and get some sponsors. I can charge for some of this. I would like to be, paid. Some people ask me, well, how did that turn out with those arrests and stuff like that? Because you never get to the point, well, I've answered it. I've never been in prison. I've never been found guilty of anything in a courtroom. I have been charged with things, and to me, they're ridiculous because I'm just standing there. I'm not doing anything. That's one of the best approaches. It's in the TV shows like Mission Impossible. If you think you're innocent and you're being wrongly accused of a crime, and the police are there and criminals are there, just stand there. Don't talk a lot. My mother always used to tell me that. Just don't talk a lot. That actually works a little. They tend to assume people that are quiet are probably honest and innocent. And all right, so that was the first one. I wasn't charged with anything. I was handcuffed and all of that in the police car. And I was held in confinement for about 4 or 5 hours, not in a jail. And I do remember all the facts, and I won't tell them because lawyers have told me the more you tell people the facts, the more they'll try again. Say you have enemies. I might be your enemy. I'm a lawyer. You're telling me how to get you the next time then, what they did wrong on that one. So on that one, that incident was erased. There was no record of it. I received a letter of apology. I was not charged with anything. I was not Mirandized. I asked them dozens of questions. They didn't answer any of them. I don't even know their names or what police department they're with. I was in handcuffs and I was confined for 4 or 5 hours. Now, to take the police side in that incident, they may have had inside knowledge, the dope, which I don't like, that I was going around traveling and I had completely zero money. I had totally run out of money and I had zero in my wallet. I had no working credit cards and I had no access to anything. So they may have thought they were giving me like a bed or a cot to sleep in for a night without money or something like that. I did hear a rumor or read gossip or read something in Asia that the famous classics children's author Jack London, who wrote Call of the Wild, once trooped around Asia and Japan or China or those countries, and they used to arrest him every night to give him a cot to sleep on in the jail cell, was what I either heard or what I read in a Chinese children's book. I believe I read that in a Chinese book, and it's not corroborated that I know of in the United States, but the famous children's writer of Call of the Wild was supposedly arrested several dozen times in Japan or South Korea or China or all three of them. So the police were giving him a place to sleep at night and they'd let him out the next day. All right, so that was the first one. About a year later, I have enemies. They're picking up on it again. They picked me up in a parking lot again, and now they're skipping the handcuffs in this one. Now they're talking to me about something in the back seat of the squad car, and I'm locked in. Same questions. Will you please charge me with a crime so I know what we're doing here? Also, can you tell me your names and can I call a lawyer? So first of all, right away, no, you can't call a lawyer. So that's twice. That's twice. I'm not entitled to make a phone call to a lawyer even. I try to get out the car. It's locked. I can't leave, so I'm confined in the back seat. And they talk to me about something. And without the benefit of consulting an attorney, they get me to agree with them to go to a weekend class about minor street matters below the misdemeanor level. And again, they screwed up my civil constitutional rights to talk to a lawyer and my other rights. So just being in the squad car for half an hour, the door's locked, I can't leave. So I'm apparently being arrested, not clearly being charged with anything, but it's a different police department, a different community from the first one a year earlier. This is where electronic surveillance comes in. They're picking up where the last police left off. They're now explaining it to me. They now explain to me if I want to know this or need to know it. It's legal to arrest a person on suspicion of something and to pick it up where the last police department left off. And they claim that was legal. Now, I'd rather consult a lawyer or a judge because I don't know that that's legal. I don't necessarily agree with that. There's all different people in the world, all different opinions, and case by case situations. So they made a deal with me. Look, you go to this weekend class about these minor street crimes. By the way, I've never been in a criminal justice class. I have taken some private security courses. Those are not considered criminal justice. All right, you go to this weekend class, and then we'll drop the matter. We'll suspend, drop, end our investigation. So that's what I did. And then they go, because we didn't charge you, they didn't explain all of this, but I figured it out. Because we didn't charge you with anything, there won't be any record of it again. And we explained it to you a little. They're still arguing with me, we can arrest somebody on suspicion of something. That's according to them. And we don't have to tell you what it is that we're suspicious of. And if you go to a one-day class or one weekend class on it, we'll just forget the matter and erase it. Now, people have asked me, was this subject drunk driving at that time? People have asked me that. No, it was not. Was this subject disturbing the peace? No, I don't think it was. Was this subject prostitution? No, it was not. So I'm not willing to say what it is. I kept it private because, once again, lawyers have told me, why would you tell anybody this? You weren't found guilty. Just forget about it. Ignore it. Go about your day, you know. Well, you like to get this junk off your chest, you know, like I'm doing right here. So it was none of those matters, and was something else, and I'm not willing to say what it is. And unfortunately, I'm the one who's going to be telling the truth. I've tried explaining this to people, especially younger people. I cannot say what it is because I don't know what it is, because it is not clearly anything. Since they did not charge me with anything, I can't say what it is. I don't know. They picked me. This is what this sounds like. This happens to me all the time. I was picked up. I'm locked in the back of a squad car for 30 minutes. Now, the first arrest was 4 to 5 hours someplace else, and I won't say where, but I do know the facts. This arrest was 30 minutes in the back of a squad car, a different community, different police department. But with electronic surveillance and stuff, they're picking up where the last ones left off. And they just said, you know, just take this weekend class. It's not criminal justice, which is for police officers, by the way. And then we will officially drop the matter. So that's what happened. Okay, now I got to the judge in that case. That case was back. I will reveal the date. That case was back in the summer of 1989. Had been unemployed for 6 months when it got to the judge. So they had advised me all along, when you get to the judge in the matter, you just tell them you went to the one-day class. It's satisfied. Just your name. You're not represented by a lawyer, so you can't talk. The judge is not allowed to ask you anything, just your name. He sees a sheet of paper. You went to a one-day class about something, some minor street matters, and that's it. That's all he's allowed to know is your name, and you went to a one-day class. Now, had they given me my civil right to a lawyer would have said, well, you don't have to do that way. Keep demanding to have them let you out of the squad car. And a lawyer might have said, you're entitled to pay a fine on it. You pay a $50, $75 fine. Then they erase it and throw it out that way. But I didn't have my legal civil right. They weren't clearly charging me with a crime. They didn't Mirandize me. So the judge asked me about it. It's been morning. I'd only gotten 45 minutes of uninterrupted rest. I'd gotten there at 7 or 8 in the morning. Now it's almost noon. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I've been standing in this huge room filled with hundreds of these. You know, most of them are traffic matters. And the judge didn't follow it. They often, at the government, they can make their own rules. They don't have to follow anything. And So he asked me, I hear you've been on a blacklist. Would you tell me about it? Well, here I had a problem. I'd like to, I'm really tired. I just want to get to lunch and get some sleep or rest if I can, because I've only got 15 minutes of rest the previous night. So I just, I probably explained, well, geez, I didn't prepare anything. It's kind of hard for me. I feel I'm under some kind of unlawful surveillance that is not letting me sleep and that is choking my throat shut and giving me splitting migraine headaches. Now, at that time, I wasn't poised enough to give that answer, but I must have, I can't even remember because I was so tired. But he did ask me to describe the blacklist a little, and he didn't seem to think I was guilty of anything. And he did ask me to talk in his courtroom, even though I was not represented by a lawyer, even though I should have had some legal right had they let me contact a lawyer to just pay a fine on it and get out of there. I did not think I was guilty of anything. I was not charged with anything. I went to a one weekend class about something as a minor matter that, uh, you know. So I was not found guilty of anything. That was it. That's now the way the government does this stuff. That was the record of that. There was a third one about 10 years ago, and in that one, they finally charged me with something. They had several, half a dozen police officers. I had the same thing. Can I call a lawyer? No. Okay, right away. That triggers suspicion. Then I'm just under suspicion of something. They're not charging me with anything. Okay. Okay. So I can't call a lawyer. Uh, so I'm not Mirandized. In that one, they were charging me with a traffic citations, and they were making mistakes again. Under the rule on that, the police officer charging you with traffic citations is supposed to be the one who observed the infractions. He was supposed to have seen you driving your vehicle badly. The man charging me that night about 10 years ago had been called from the police station. He was supposedly their expert. He had never witnessed me driving an automobile. He did not witness any incident that night. He did not see anything. They have him arresting me and charging me. That's already wrong. All right, so now I'm not Mirandized again. I can't call a lawyer again. And let me just go over my memories, see what happened. One of my main complaints with this is, other than I'm not Mirandized, I can't call a lawyer, and there again, all these incidents, they're not clearly charging me with anything. My complaint in that one, the first one, the arresting police officer is not the one who observed the traffic incident, which seems to go against their own rules. And then two, he is not charging me with a traffic citation that I was pulled over for. I do know what I was doing wrong on the night in terms of bad driving. I asked to be let out of it because it was very late at night. There were no vehicles on the road. The closest vehicles were a mile back there at a stoplight. And it was very bad visibility with sleet and snow and stuff. And there were no witnesses to what happened. What happened was, I do remember it and I do know the facts, and lawyers have told me not to share the facts because your enemy will pick it up again and try it again. I accidentally did something wrong on the road. I made a wrong turn someplace. I'm going to phrase it loosely. I know exactly what the traffic citation was. The police officer was in a speed trap. If he charges me with that, I have to accept it because that was what I was doing. I made a wrong turn. If he charges me with that and he's the one who observed it, he was a young, inexperienced police officer. People get nervous around me because of my age or stature or whatever. If he hangs by the window longer, I just tell him that because I've done that in private security down in Houston. This was up in Milwaukee about 10 years ago. I just tell him at the window, look, if you charge me with that I made a wrong turn, I'm going to have to pay it or whatever because that is what I did. He's going to call his expert from the headquarters. They're going to bring him out, some other police officers, and they're going to start charging me with some other things that I did not do, which is not, that's not what the law says. So now the first two arrests, they failed to charge me. Now this third one, they're charging me with too many things and they're making things up. So this expert comes out and he's just lying. He's making things up. He's claiming that I've been found with marijuana on me. I don't smoke marijuana. I didn't have any marijuana on me that night. I haven't had marijuana seriously on me at any age. I only, like other college students, experimented with it a little in the dorms and the fraternity in the 1970s. So at that point, this is 10 years ago, I'm not a habitual marijuana smoker because that's what the police were saying. So he's already making stuff up. He claims that I have two teenage girls in the car with me. I do not. I'm driving the car alone. So he's lying. I read this in his written report the next day. He claims my eyes are all red because of how stoned I am from all the marijuana I've been smoking. That is not correct. I don't smoke marijuana. I did not have marijuana on me that night. So, the next day they release me. I read the report, and I only read half of it. I'm depressed. He's made it up. They've got the wrong police officer. This police officer never witnessed me driving a motor vehicle, and he's making things up. He claims when he found me, I was in the back seat of the car, and I was so stoned from marijuana that I was curled over on the back seat, and I couldn't even stand or walk or anything. And then I had two teenage women in the car with me. Well, this is all lying. I always drive around alone. I've never, as an adult, had two teenage women in a car with me. I don't smoke marijuana. I did not have any woman or other people with me that night. I was in the car alone. I did not have marijuana. I didn't have any of that. So, again, this is silly. This is a farce the next day. So when I get to a judge, the government doesn't tell you stuff. I just stand there and I plead innocent. And again, this would be interesting to lawyers. Now I'm 2.5 hours into this. This would be interesting to lawyers, I would think. Well, the judge's eyes pop open. These guys have been spying on me. They know me. Michael, you always mail they always do this. Michael, you always mail the no contest fine in. Why are you pleading innocent? Don't you understand the law? Well, I do understand the law. They're charging me with having marijuana on me, with having two teenage girls in the car. I don't have any woman or any people in the car at all. I don't have teenage women in the car. I don't smoke marijuana. They've got the wrong person or something. So this judge, he skipped over that part. He didn't pick up on it. He just charged me with a traffic citation. So I didn't get it. So I started pleading innocent. And then, of course, people inform me. The problem with that, I call attorneys and you get free advice. They go, well, the problem with pleading innocent is that they can find you guilty. Whereas if you plead no contest, they cannot find you guilty. You just pay a fine on it, like I thought. And I said, well, I must be missing something here. I can't just plead no contest because they're saying I had marijuana and teenagers and stuff. Apparently, when I went to the first judge in that case, he might have known about that police officer's written report, their so-called expert that they brought out from their headquarters. And he apparently just ignored that. He just went ahead with the traffic. I guess these people can just make their own rules as they go along. He just went ahead with a traffic citation part. And I'm still pleading innocent to that part because he's got the wrong one. I would have told them if they ever let me talk or let me answer, if they charge me with making a wrong turn, I'll have to pay the fine on that because that's what happened. But if they're charging me with any of this other stuff, I have to plead innocent because that's not what happened. So the judge was very alarmed. He said, "You normally just mail the no contest, and it doesn't make sense to me. They're charging me with marijuana and stuff and statutory rape and that kind of thing. How can you just plead no contest to all of that?" So the first judge apparently just ignored that report and just went ahead with the traffic citation part of it. So that's why there's the confusion there. So I'm pleading innocent. Then I got down to another judge in downtown Milwaukee, and I run into the lawyer prosecuting me, and I you know, they're now cheating me in the courtroom. There, all the other people in the courtroom can talk in the gallery, and the judge, the court bailiff, says he'll remove me and arrest me if I talk in the gallery, even though all the other people are talking. So I go out in the hallway and I ask this prosecuting attorney, who also works for the government, if we can have a compromise on this because it's not clear what they're charging me with. They're trying to charge me with like half a dozen things. So she's like a lot of lousy lawyers who do a bad job or whatever. She's going to try to follow a textbook to the letter. She just stands there and won't talk at all, won't say anything, won't make any, compromise, no compromise. So, I get up in front of the judge and I want to explain this again. Look, they're charging me with misdemeanors and things they're apparently charging me with crimes, half a dozen of them. And again, like he pounds his gavel real hard. You cannot talk in the courtroom. I can only tell him my name, even in that. So again, I have to look at this visually. I can only tell him my name. I don't have a lawyer. I can apparently mail the no contest fine in like I normally do. Apparently, they're just going ahead with a traffic citation part of it. And this other part that says that I smoke marijuana and my eyes are red and I'm sound asleep. I'm never sound asleep. And I'm sound asleep on the back seat and I'm curled up in the fetal position. This is apparently fiction, nonsense, that their expert made up from his headquarters. So I'm apparently not being charged with that. So when I get home later, as the weeks and days go by, I get phone calls from a college in China that wants to hire me. And I've been putting them off. I could have gotten hired by them months earlier, but I've been real interested in renovating my mother's old house from her father, from my grandfather. I've put a new heating furnace in. That's really why they're arresting me. I put a new gas line out to the street and a new heating furnace in my car salesman grandfather's house, and they're arresting me for it because I made changes there where the building hasn't changed in like 75 years, and I actually changed something. That's why why I'm getting traffic citations. So I phoned the courthouse. I mentioned this. Whenever you talk to people that are not authorities, they let you finish sentences. So I reached some kind of assistant or court bailiff, and I said, I thought I was being charged with all this with the marijuana and stuff, so that's why I was pleading innocent. Well, I've got this job offer. I'd like to go to China and teach at this university. He says, sure, no problem. Just like we told you, just mail the no contest fine in. Apparently, it's just the traffic citation part. And so I just mailed it in. And that was it. Now, I was picked up by a gang of vigilantes once in South Korea. I was in the tourist red light district. They don't really have red light there because I'm not an expert, but I believe it's legal to have like an escort at a nightclub, unless I'm wrong. I think that's legal. Might be wrong. I don't know. I had not had sex with anyone. I had not had any relations with a woman. A gang of like 15 vigilantes picked me up, and they forced me back against my will to a nightclub where I had been a customer earlier in the evening. And I've had problems with impotence. So I had been sitting in the nightclub and I had been paying a woman cash money, not for sex. I had been paying her cash money to help me rehearse for school because I had this problem with impotence. And I was not familiar with the fact that they sold sex pills over the counter in Asia. I did not know that at that time. I guess this I can't get prosecuted in the United States. I guess this took place approximately 2010 or 2009, I think it was. So the vigilantes had me stare at the outside of the nightclub where I had thrown a beer bottle off a brick wall. Now in Houston, where I came from, and again, you have to get the red tape permission. I had to get permission at a post office in Houston to leave the U.S. to teach in South Korea. An older woman showed up. She said, "Michael, we have a lot of jobs around here. We're sad to see you go." I got her permission. Then I got a passport book in the mail from a passport service. If you go through a passport service, it was about $150. It takes 2 weeks only. Or if you try to do it yourself, all the red tape, that can take up to 6 months. And then I'd gone down, followed directions to the South Korean embassy, gotten a stamp in it with a visa. So I got the visa and everything. And I went over to my first school in Busan, South Korea. So I've been paying this woman in a bar to dance with me, not to have sex. That was not why I was paying her. And I was paying her to help me rehearse for school because I had these problems with impotence. And she was taking the money from me and then going up and dancing with another man. And I was like rehearsing with a microphone or something. So I was getting upset. I was paying her and she was rehearsing with other men, other customers in the bar. She was acting like it was them who, it was another man who had paid her. So when I got outside the bar, it says in Houston it's legal to do this. They have chicken mesh and stuff. If you smash a beer bottle in a bar where it's safe, where you don't damage anything in Houston, there's some old law, from 100 years ago. It's acceptable. If you feel you've been treated unfairly in a bar and you smash a bottle off their brick wall outdoors and you don't damage anything, that's why they have the chicken wire in the bar. If you throw it off the chicken wire and it breaks, it used to be like they'd have a stage entertainer and you didn't like it, and you'd throw an egg or something or a cotton ball, a tennis ball at the stage entertainer. You go, boo, you didn't like his show. You'd throw a beer bottle at it without hurting anybody. So I was upset that I paid this woman this money, and it was not for sex. It was to rehearse me for school because I had problems with impotence and problems speaking the foreign language and so on. So she was acting like my identity was some other man's in the bar, and it made me upset. So I tossed a beer bottle at a nicely well decorated brick wall outside the bar. I watched it. The bottle smashed. It fell to the asphalt or tar, whatever you call it. I looked at the lights and everything, the wall hangings, nothing damaged, no problem. So I walk away. I'm walking away. About 5, 10 minutes later, all these, bar, what do you call them? They used to be. I used to know what they were called. The guy that stands at the door and collects money, the bouncer. Okay, all these bouncers and bartender types show up. About 15 of them. And I'm explaining if they could only understand English. Of course, I don't speak Korean. I'm going, I'm not guilty. I didn't do anything. I just, broke a beer bottle. That's legal as far as I know, where I came from in Houston. So they take me back to the bar. They bring all the female employees outside the nightclub, 10, 15 of them. A lot of young women, skinny, nice looking. And they all look down at the ground. That means they're guilty and I'm innocent. So they released me. That's what that means. I know about it. They asked them, this Mike guy just violated a law, right? Tell us what he did. And they all looked down at the ground and looked guilty. They didn't talk. I'm not accused of anything. This is yet another incident where I'm picked up again, confined for a short time, 15 minutes, And I'm not clearly being charged with anything. I'm just being picked up again under suspicion of something. And of course, all over the world, well, you're not allowed to talk loud. You're not allowed to disagree with people. You're not allowed to argue with people. Blah, blah, blah. All right, so now the same thing again. I'm released. They had no evidence of anything anyway. There's just a broken beer bottle sitting there, and nothing's been damaged. Unfortunately, people are tricky sometimes. You want the police to come out, the real thing. I'm telling my enemy again, you got to shoot somebody with a gun. There's got to be blood there. It's got to be on a videotape and witnesses, and then the police can come out. But somebody just broke something, a stapler dropped on the ground or a beer bottle. Some people were talking loudly, and you think that's against the law? They were arguing about something. That guy was noisy in his apartment. I could hear his voice. You think the police are supposed to do something about that? You think that's against the law to talk loudly or to argue with somebody? And most of the time, I'm not even doing that. I'm just sitting there or standing there, and these people tap my shoulder from behind. So these 15 vigilantes released me. The women all looked down. They all looked guilty. They were supposed to be dancing with me. It was not sex. That was not it. I had shelled out about $100 to try to rehearse practice for a children's school. Problems with impotence. I didn't know they sold sex pills in the neighborhood. I didn't know that. And not drunk, not disturbing the peace, blah, blah, blah. They released me, let me go. Now another incident, also South Korea. Most people would jump to the conclusion that this is in China, right? No. This is in the one that's supposedly friendly with the United States. This is in South Korea. Now another one. I'm just standing in a hallway. I'm waiting for a couple young toddlers to put costumes on. This one got a large audience on the internet. I posted it at an expat website for South Korea back around in 2010, I believe it was that I posted it. Or maybe it was 2009. I just took a couple of aspirin, and my eyes are white. They're not red. I have brown eyes and a white pigment. This is mostly decaf coffee. No official breakfast this morning. It's 9:49. I talked my way through breakfast. I'm going to arrest you. You're not allowed to talk your way through breakfast. All right, so what I'm saying is, most of these have not worked. So I don't think I'm giving my enemies anything. They supposedly have rules that they're only allowed a certain number of attempts. So these attempts I'm talking about are going to be 10, 12, 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. They have told me I shouldn't reveal it. They've said, I'm going to get you now because 50 years ago you drove through a red light. That's material for a comedy act. Are you kidding? I've been told things like this. Wasn't that you that drove through that red light intersection 50 years ago? Well, I'm going to get you for it right now. I've been told things like that. And you know what? I know you're going to find this hard to believe. It's legal to tell a person that. What I just did there, that whole thing, according to me, is legal. I didn't punch anybody. You have to have the gun and shoot people. There's got to be blood coming out, and they got to have it on a videotape. Otherwise, that whole thing is very expensive for the government. They have to constantly bring in all sorts of witnesses that he did this, he did that, and he said this, and he said... Those things that are going, he said stuff, that's costing taxpayers millions of dollars. Well, he said this and he said that. That's no good. It's legal to say anything, any place. I mean, you're insane. I mean, he said something to me. Well, that isn't legal. He can't tell me that. I'm sorry. I've been told I'm arrested and no and stuff like that millions of times. Since you can tell me that, you know, I at least want to tell you my side of the story. Most people are good people and they know this stuff is legal and they know I'm not a law violator. A small percentage, but I'm exaggerating. Maybe it's 1 out of 3. They really think it's illegal. Like if you go like this, I don't like you. They think that's illegal and you should be arrested for that. I don't agree with that. I think it's a First Amendment deal in the United States, and foreign countries have similar things. Foreign countries are even easier on that. They have much smaller, different police forces. They have little squirt guns and stuff. They can't bother the police for something like that. They have to have the real thing. You have to have a gun. You have to shoot the guy. There's got to be blood and DNA and fingerprints, and it's got to be on a videotape. All that other crap gets to be a bunch of arguing with people. Well, the cop was in the bar and he was off duty and he fell off the bar stool. And I accidentally dropped a tray of popcorn on him and he got up and he slugged me in the face. And then as a result, I pushed him back against the wall. And then I took out my gun and he punched me again and I shot him. You see how much of that is an opinion? You're a lawyer, you're a judge, you're supposed to adjudicate that. What I just got told there or said, that was most of that's just an opinion. That the guy, the popcorn fell on him and he must have been drinking beer, or was it Jack Daniels, or what was it? I'm going to repeat all throughout here. This is for the enemy, which is 1 out of 100, like teenagers or whatever. You got to have the gun. You got to really shoot the guy. There's got to be blood, and it's got to be on the videotape. There's a lot of that's just an opinion or something. That was illegal to drink that mostly decaffeinated coffee. All right. So I'm standing in a hallway. There's 2 toddlers that I know of who are in a huge dressing room trying on costumes. And then I'm going to get out, look at their costumes, and take them back to the class. This was a deal I had made with my teacher. I'm sorry this stuff is so wordy. I just can't do it fast. That's why I've worked as a writer and why most of my relatives were salesmen. Just can't do stuff fast, cut to the chase. So, okay. Unknown to me, the assistant teacher that I had treated extremely generously, this is why I have the problem. I had made an agreement with her. I was on my first internship in Korea. This was my second school. It was a temporary winter camp for 1.5 months. And sadly, apparently they're not hiring me, the great Michael Kajowski, permanently in Korea. The whole class, if they're young kids, they play along. They go, oh, these are wonderful experiences. If they play along, they go, oh. I had a real nice class in my first school in Korea where they said, oh, we're so sorry to see you go, Michael. You're going to go up to Seoul. And I tried to explain to them, look, my contract here with this school is ending. They're apparently not going to keep me permanently, so it is an internship. And now I'm going to go up to another short one for 1.5 months in Seoul. So the kids all go, oh, and we feel sorry for you, and they pat you, and they want to draw you little maps and stuff. Those are real. I'm trying to encourage the government a little with all the negative stuff. They have positive things that happen at the government, in government schools, private English academies, private offices. They have good things that happen in some of them. So, what was I saying? So now I'm up at this 1.5 months camp, and the other teachers have asked on my behalf, can you keep Michael? Sadly. Sadly, my friends, they're not going to keep me in Korea. And the other teachers, big meeting, hundreds of people for the regular morning meeting. For a couple meetings in a row, a couple weeks in a row, some teachers that knew me asked, we all have 6-month, 1-year contracts. He's only got a 1.5 month temporary deal. Can't you? And a lot of other people had temporary deals worse than me just for 1 week or something. And they go, well, he looks like a good teacher to us. Can't you keep him? And nope, 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 nope. No, the Korean guy would just sit there and not say anything. I was in Los Angeles once, same thing. I was in an office receptionist, temporary from a temporary employment agency, probably. And the other people in the office said, "Look, that's how we started. We were temporary at the receptionist." So I handled complaints and stuff for him. It was either in or near Beverly Hills, around in Hollywood. The owner was a rich guy who worked in the office from Beverly Hills. So a woman from come down there from Canada did the same thing. Receptionist, she asked on my behalf, "Well, you kept us. Can't you keep Michael also? Because if you don't keep him, he won't ever come back to Los Angeles." That's what she told him. He just sat there like he normally does.